this regular session of the Santa Barbara School Board of Education for Tuesday, August 11th, 2009. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We do have Spanish translation available.
We have Vivian Rodriguez with us tonight. Vivian.
Sí, buenas noches y bienvenidos de parte de la Junta Directiva del Distrito Escolar de Santa Bárbara. Si hay alguien que necesite la ayuda de un intérprete, por favor levante la mano para darle un audífono. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you. And we also have headsets for the hearing impaired. If you need one, please contact one of our staff members here on the side. Introductions, proclamations, presentations, or recognitions.
Well, we're pleased to have with us tonight Gabriela Rodriguez, and with Gabriela is a former board member, Nancy Harder. Gabriela is program coordinator of Future Leaders of America, and board members know that a number of our students find great inspiration in the activities of Future Leaders of America, and she's here to share information on their programs for youth in our area. Gabriela?
Hi, thank you for having Future Leaders of America here today. It is our pleasure to share a little bit more about our program and the many services we provide to our community here in Santa Barbara, the city of Santa Barbara County, and Ventura County as well. Brief history about Future Leaders of America. It started in 1982 by a high school counselor in his efforts to encourage Latino youth to pursue higher education and to become role models for other teens in their community. After losing 17 youth to gangs, violence, teen pregnancies, high school dropouts, and many other negative behaviors in our community, this high school counselor, Gilbert Cuevas, in the city of Oxnard, decided to begin a program, and Future Leaders of America came from there. And since then, we have gone a long way. Each year, we introduce a group of 80 to 100 new participants to participate in the program, and beginning with our Youth Summer Leadership Camp, which recently took place this last week. And in this Summer Leadership Camp, our students learn about leadership skills, public speaking skills, parliamentary procedures, goal setting, the importance of education, and many other factors that will encourage our young students to become other role models for teens, for other teens, for their homes, for their schools, and for the community as a whole. We have a school club established at each of the local high schools from Carpinteria to Goleta, and in Santa Maria as well. And we also have university seminars, enrichment workshops, and family leadership camps where the entire family is encouraged to attend this weekend leadership camp as well. So in a nutshell, Future Leaders of America provides leadership training, educational opportunities, and promotes the personal development of Latino youth, but for youth as a whole. So it's open for every youth out in the city of Santa Barbara, Carpinteria, Goleta, and surrounding areas as well. And I am the program coordinator representing the south of Santa Barbara County. But if anybody needs any more information or detailed information, I did bring some informational packages. And for us, it's a pleasure to have this opportunity to shine some light in our program. I do not know if there's any specific questions about our program, or I could talk about the wonderful things that it does.
I actually had the opportunity to go up to your camp in Santa Ynez just last week.
Yes.
It was at Camp Whittier, is that correct?
Yes, at Camp Whittier.
And it was really impressive to see the kids learning. The day that I was there, they were working on goal-setting skills. So you
Yes.
could see, I think one of the most impressive things about Future Leaders of America is that you start going into ninth grade, and then you come back and you're working on your leadership
Yes.
skills within the group itself.
Yes.
And you, in fact, went through the program.
I personally went through the program, and I've been involved with the organization since I was 13 years old. And I've had the opportunity and privilege to stay involved with the organization throughout my high school, my college career, and now as a program coordinator. And the beauty about Future Leaders of America is that it's a peer-to-peer mentorship model. So once our students go through the organization, they have different levels of involvement that they could come back. And they are taught to give back to their community. They're taught to help others. And every step of the way, they learn more leadership training, more in-depth training, facilitation skills, and listening, communication, and many other tools that we empower these youth to to succeed. And a lot of our alumni have gone to many parts of the country, including universities such as Harvard, Yale, Stanford, USC. Throughout the state and throughout the country, we have a lot of students involved with the organization. And another thing that I'd like to mention is that for over 22 years, it was solely based on volunteers. And this is a very grassroots organization, and it started off, like I said, with a dream that a high school counselor had from his garage. And from then to now, we have 3 offices established: Santa Maria, Santa Barbara, and Ventura. And all our volunteers are still young people empowering other youth. So it's a great model, and it's a wonderful program that changes lives. And I personally say that it changed my entire family and myself. So it's very powerful, and hopefully we can share this with many other students in the future here in San Marcos, Santa Barbara, Dos Pueblos, and Carpinteria. So thank you for your time, and
Thank
if there's
you.
any other questions, my contact information is also there, and I'd love to come and share this, and for you to come and see the magic of Future Leaders of America. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It is a great program for many of our students. And that's it for presentations tonight.
And with that, we move on to the superintendent's report.
Well, it's the beginning of a new school year. Our year-round schools, Santa Barbara Community Academy and Cleveland School, have reported a smooth start for the 2009-2010 school year. Cleveland has 389 students, and Santa Barbara Community Academy has 272 students. And every time I talk to Eric Nichols, he says, and growing. All other schools are gearing up to open on Monday, August 24. So that's the big day. Drivers, please be forewarned as you head out on your morning commute. We have students making their way to school. Parent packets are being distributed. Homeroom lists will soon be posted, and organizational tools such as Santa Barbara High School's student handbook. In fact, a number of schools have student handbooks. Board members, I'd like you to take a look at this. You'll find a lot of very useful information about the school, about the expectations of the school in the front, and then a student organizer that they are expected to use in every classroom, in every day, or during every day. This one's from Santa Barbara Junior High, but I've seen it from all of the junior highs. And they will help our students to have a successful start. Individual student STAR test results have been mailed home to parents and board. I'm going to show you a picture in just a moment, but not yet. Before I do, let me tell you that we will be sharing district data on the STAR results at our next board meeting, as we expect the information to be finalized by this time. We have preliminary results, and there needs to be some fine-tuning on those results, and we will not have the final results from the state. In fact, other districts are reporting their results. I think they're out a little in front, but I do want to say that over the past few years, many of our scores increased annually. In fact, a year ago, I was showing you scores that were the highest scores we have ever seen in the district in most areas. And that applied to our Latino students. It applied to our students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged, the highest scores for our English learners, and the highest scores for our students who are in special education. This year, there is a dramatic turn in those scores, and this year we are seeing not just the highest scores, but major gains beyond that. I'd like you to see a sample picture just from the elementary level. These are English language arts results. They are 6-year results, and you'll see that what had been working its way up is now looking like a dramatic increase in this last year. So this last year, 2008-09, are based on the spring STAR test results, and Davis Hayden can hardly contain himself. Well, Robin Sawaski too. I said, you're going to have a great evaluation this year. So I'm very pleased to report what looks like a dramatic uptick in our student performance. This despite budget reduction of some $4 million last year. You know, it's really our people, our dedicated teaching staff who connect with students and who do a fine job teaching that makes all the difference. So I'll be happy to give you more of those results in the future.
Are there any breakdowns by school?
Yes, there will be.
That's the district, right?
Yes, there will be, and almost all of the elementary schools made an increase. The junior highs, I believe the same thing happened, and one of the high schools showed an increase. Well, it varies. It depends on whether it's English language arts or math. It depends on whether it's the total school-wide result. You'll see various differences in our white achievement, our Latino achievement, and so forth.
Well, that's
So,
my next question. Do socioeconomically disadvantaged student scores show the same upturn?
yes, they do. And special education and Latino students versus white students. In fact,
That's very good. That's good.
well, I was just looking at the trajectory of the graphs, and I don't see an appreciable difference in each of those trajectories, so that I would guess that there's significantly more gain among our English learners, for example, than non-English.
May I ask a brief question? Obviously, this is going to come back to us as a much more
It
in-depth finalized report at our next regular meeting. But when, Dr. Hayden, is it going to be out on the CDE website?
First of all, I want to stress that these are preliminary. We officially will, we can't show the official results until they are released by the state, and right now we haven't gotten the official results, and when we get them, they'll be embargoed for a week, and then we'll be able to release them. These are what I've calculated from what has been released, which is the raw data. And so these could be 1% or 2% off, but they're probably pretty close. The state, who knows when they're going to actually get it out. It's supposed to be about 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now. End of August is when they say they're going to get it out.
End of August for the STAR scores or for the APR?
Everything, STAR, No Child Left Behind, the AYP, the API. We should get the preliminary results and all that at the end of August.
The whole rush of scores.
Okay.
So these are calculations locally. These are things you did.
Yes. But they're based on each student's score, which in this case would be AYP based, the percent of students who are at proficient or higher. Well, let me go on. We're going into this school year with some outstanding professional development training. The 5-day Read 180 training has been going on this week. We have a management meeting tomorrow morning. In the afternoon, all principals and assistant principal will participate in standards-based standards-aligned instructional leadership. We call it SAIL. The SAIL training continues on Thursday. More math trainings will be ongoing this week and next week. Next Monday, we will hold a half-day special education retreat for all special education teachers and support staff. On Tuesday of next week, Dr. Anthony Muhammad will focus on professional learning communities when he speaks to our elementary certificated staff. Board, I hope that you'll attend either that Tuesday or Wednesday, the following day, when Dr. Muhammad will work with the secondary certificated staff. Going on, Phil Levian, an English and Performing Arts teacher at San Marcos High School, was named the 2009-2010 Santa Barbara County Distinguished Educator by County Superintendent of Schools Bill Cerrone on August 6th. Distinguished educators provide a category form to acknowledge outstanding teachers in the Teacher of the Year Awards program. This year, the selection committee, which included representatives of teachers, administrators, PTAs, and school boards, expressed strong feelings that Phil's application and credentials were clearly Teacher of the Year caliber. The selection committee members could only select one teacher to represent the county to the State Teacher of the Year Award, but members felt strongly that it should also acknowledge the excellence of this outstanding educator. And you've seen Phil with students in front of the board before. I have sent him our congratulations on behalf of myself and the board, and our best wishes. You know, it's people like Phil who pour the energy and creative labors of love of his life into our students and worked with their aspirations and their sense of worth and ability. La Colina Junior High School teacher Rebecca Sillers has been awarded a Fulbright Teacher Exchange grant to teach in London, England. She is one of 60 U.S. citizens who will travel abroad during the 2009-2010 academic year through the Fulbright Classroom Teacher Exchange Program. And Rebecca's exchange partner will be Yasmin Ali Khan, and we'll be welcoming Yasmin to the district soon. The board brief. My office regularly issues a report to the board called the Board Brief. It's a collection of reports and news articles on district matters. A copy of the July 17 board brief is on display in the reception area or in my office. Sadly, longtime teacher Pete Rellis passed away this summer. Our secondary district also lost Lacumber Junior High School science health teacher Dean Jensen. Dean unexpectedly died of a heart attack. An ocean paddle out and memorial was held this last Friday. Principal Joanne Keynes tells us that after school starts, Lacumber will hold a dedication ceremony and a bench will be placed in front of the school with a plaque and surfboard etching on Dean's behalf. This ends the superintendent's report.
Thank you. Moving on to item C2, announcement of closed session action. I do have 2 items to report out. On item B2, liability claim, it was moved by Mr. Herron and seconded by Mrs. Cordero to reject the liability claim by Jane Faulkner based on insurance policy company recommendation. It passed 3-0 with Dr. Noel absent and Mrs. Deacon absent from the room for that vote.
Madam President?
Yes.
Yeah, I wondered if I may have the record show that I felt that I objected to having to item B4 on the closed session agenda and item B5 on the closed session agenda, both of which objections were related to what I perceived to be violations of the Brown and/or Rhoda Acts.
Thank you. The other item from closed session was item B6, where it was moved, that's the California High School Exit Exam Casey waiver for graduation for students with disabilities. That was moved by Mrs. Cordero, seconded by Mrs. Deacon, to approve the waivers for the listed students with disabilities. That passed 4-0 with Dr. Noel absent.
President Parker?
Yes,
Could
Mrs.
the
Deacon.
record just reflect that I recused myself on item B2?
Yes, you recused yourself and left the room. Item C3, public comments. Do we have any public comment at this time?
Joan Esposito, followed by Carolyn Renard.
And I also want to be really clear that this is the time to speak on any items that are on the consent agenda, any items that are D.
Point of order, Madam President?
Yes, Dr. Noel.
My reading of Board Policy 9323 suggests that restricting comments on items on the consent agenda to the public comments phrase is inconsistent with board policy and the education code.
Maybe Mr. Price would like to address this, but I don't have that policy in front of me, so I would have to take a look at it again.
On the occasion of an issue such as this, it would be extremely helpful to have the question or the policy furnished ahead of time. I don't have the board policy memorized. However, I have gone over with staff the manner in which the agenda language is written, and my belief, without going back and specifically looking at the policy, is that it is appropriate and correct.
Well, I call for that to be examined.
Okay, Mrs. Cordero?
Does Mr. Noel have do you have the copy of the board policy? Do you have the copy of the board policy with you?
No.
Oh.
Right, well, at this time, we will go ahead and take public comment on matters that are under the jurisdiction of the school board. Anything on the D agenda item, And I think that that's it at this point for public comments, since we've gotten through the Cs.
Well, I'd like to object that you're giving us very little time to address the comments that we need to address, the issues we need to address. And, okay, I presented this board with a case on June 29th, a case of a parent. And it was to do with Dr. Ronzoni. At the time, I didn't mention the principal's name, but I think it's time we mentioned her name. Okay. You received an email that I sent to Dr. Savas, and I have last copies along. I also sent it to you when you didn't. Okay. And I think I did send along to your personal emails too, and it went back. There were 3 emails in there. I feel that my response from Dr. Savas, and I feel that the information that Dr. Ronzoni gave to Dr. Savas was less than honest. And I think this kind of lack of honesty cannot go unchecked anymore, because it takes a lot of time. We're fighting each other. We're not dealing with the child's case. And I would like to have a meeting with the school board members on this issue, because this is a child who's been delayed assessments, I think, for a couple of years. And Dr. Ronzoni is responsible for it. And if what she says in her email and what Dr. Savas says to me in the email, what Dr. Ronzoni expressed to him, is total fabrication, totally fabricated. And this has to stop. This is a principle. And she's affecting the lives of children. She's pushing them in danger.
Can I have a point of order?
Yes.
I can't find it with me, but one of our board policies on this topic is if you start using names of people,
Yeah.
it inhibits maybe some of our potential future obligations or things. And there's a way to make a request to do this
Okay.
in private.
I
but,
wasn't aware of that. I didn't.
I can't find it exactly
Yeah.
correct, but it's in there someplace.
Yeah.
That if you, I'll
Well,
keep
you know,
looking for it.
I've come in front of you now a few times with this issue, with this principal, and I haven't used her name before. But I'm getting a little bit frustrated when she's still playing the same games. And I don't, you know, as I say, both of these people, Dr. Savas, are being less than honest. We need to get this moving. This should have been taken care of right after the last board meeting, and I would appreciate this board if you really hold your staff accountable. Do you want me to go ahead and talk about am I supposed to do
Point of order.
Yes, Dr. Noel.
Was this, I didn't hear Mr. Aaron's remark entirely, but was it about personal criticism?
No, it's about when you have the complaint process.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
And
I'm not sure.
Your
Maybe-
time is up at
It's
this
okay.
point.
Okay. And I would like to come back up and do something on the FICMAT report.
Yeah, that's a separate agenda item.
This is the case in point, Mr. Price. Carolyn Renard wants to talk about C3, which is public comment, but also about D1, which is on the consent calendar. And per our policy, she needs to combine her talking about those 2 issues together in 3 minutes.
That is the established agenda format that's been in existence for some time, which I previously reviewed, yes.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, first of all, Mr. Herron, Joan Esposito has every right to mention the name of the person she is referring to. She already told you just now that she didn't mention the name for the first 2 times she spoke about the person, but since nothing had been done, that's why she mentioned the name. She has a right to do that, and you should not try to impinge on that right.
I'm just.
And I know, but you need to know what the law is and what the public's rights are when they speak so that you don't infringe upon them like you were apparently trying to do. I'm asking that this item be put on the agenda, the inappropriate limitation of public comment. So please consider this a formal request. And apparently, you know, this hasn't been the policy for a long time. It became the policy after a lot of parents started coming and speaking out at board meetings. That's when you guys limited the public policy, apparently with Mr. Price's help, as he just admitted.
And I'm going to jump in here, Ms. Renard, because I do want to be sure that you're clear that
Okay,
requests.
wait just a minute, let me,
You can
okay,
pause
you're
it for a
impinging
moment.
upon my comment time, and I'm taking it off of the 3, I'm making sure that the 3 minutes
If
isn't
you
being
want to make a
included.
request for something to be on the agenda, it does need to be written.
No, it doesn't. I just need to make a statement at a board meeting. You're informed, that's all the law requires that I do.
Board bylaw is that it's a written
It
policy.
doesn't matter if there's a board bylaw, state law and the education code gives me the right to have an item put on the agenda. I'm appropriately informing you of that request. You don't have the right to put any further limitations on my right.
The board
If
president
I wasn't
is
asking at a
expl-
board meeting, maybe you might have the right to require me to put it in writing, but since I'm asking at a board meeting, you don't have that right.
Yes, Mr. Price.
The board president is absolutely correct in terms of the rule that's in place in the policy and the right of the board to develop reasonable rules and regulations that require things to be submitted in writing.
Yeah,
Thank you.
but you said
Thank you.
reasonable. There is no good reason
At
to
this
require
time,
me to
Mr.
put it in
Smith,
writing
you may
after
go ahead and
I-
start the time again.
Excuse me, I wasn't finished. There's no good reason to require me to put it in writing after I bring it up at a public meeting like this. So you give me the good reason for it, and then it'll be legal to have a policy to require me to put it in writing after I bring it up at a public meeting.
I can do that.
I also want to mention to Mr. Sarvis, yes, you know, I think probably the No Child Left Behind scores will continue to improve because the district continues to expel all the students that are doing poorly and that have learning problems, or put them in a program like your Bridge program that's a continuation school that doesn't count on your No Child Left Behind scores, or send them to El Puente through the back door. Yeah, I think your scores will continue to improve. Congratulations, Dr. Sarvis. Also, I'd like to say that there was a Brown Act noticing violation on this agenda, and Mr. Sarvis apparently was quite aware of it. The additional notice was sent out, an attachment to the agenda regarding the FICMAT report. It was not only a noticing requirement, but it was a agendizing violation because this additional attachment was apparently just sent out to board members and not to the other people who were signed up to be noticed of things being sent out. I didn't receive one. And so you guys can't discuss this additional attachment during this board meeting, and you'll be violating the Brown Act. And I would have liked to have spent these 3 minutes discussing the Desert Independent article about Mr. Sarvis and the things that have come to light in this article about Mr. Sarvis's behavior regarding
About 8 seconds.
regarding the special education director that was hired and then had to leave real quickly, and how the significance of Mr. Sarvis's reported behavior in regard to his performance as a superintendent at this district, and how the board needs to do something about this.
Thank you, Ms. Renard.
May I make a brief comment? I just,
Let's not get into a
well, I
brief
just
comments
wanted
on
to
this.
be clear that the scores that you just saw were elementary student scores. We don't expel elementary students.
Thank you.
Carmen Esquivel, followed by Lane Wheeler.
Good evening. Today I'm here today, and I'm so glad many Spanish-speaking parents, well, not many, but enough showed up. I wanted to mention that in the FICMAT findings, they identified a clear disconnect between families and staff due to language and cultural barriers. As a result, parents feel they're being left out. Today I'm here to request, in behalf of many Spanish-speaking families, that this board meeting be, not only this, all board meetings be televised in Spanish, not because of special ed students, but because of all the families you're serving. The majority are Spanish-speaking, and I'm just gonna tell you that I found myself interpreting a house load of people on many occasions, so I really appreciate if I keep searching the channels, checking for Spanish board meetings, so I am requesting that your board meetings be televised in Spanish.
Thank you. Lane Wheeler?
Thank you. Lane Wheeler, President of Santa Barbara Teachers Association. Unfortunately, this summer, we've lost two outstanding educators. Pete Rellis, who we knew was in a declining state of health and decided to retire. At the last board meeting, he was honored for his 35 years of service. And tragically, Dean Jensen over the summer as a result of a heart attack. I'm requesting that you, at this point, look forward and honor these people as important members of our community. The La Cuesta campus is currently searching for a new name, and I can't think of a better name for that institution of higher learning than the Rellis School. He has been a marked pilgrim in this community for equity and for education, and I think it would be a just and proper honor to ask La Cuesta to accept his name as part of whatever naming process they go through. I would also request that Dean Jensen be formally honored with a building or a wing or the auditorium, something that would befit his magnanimous personality, the hours and hours and hours of service that he gave, the 15 years of service he gave to La Cumbre Junior High School, seeing it through all of its trials and tribulations, and the fact that it's become a model institution in the community. And I would call on you to take that action at an appropriate board meeting and move forth to honor not only their memory, but the contributions that they've made to both students, families, and the educational process, and their fellow brothers and sisters in the teaching community. And it would seem like an appropriate thing to do, and I would call on the board to take that action. Thank you very much.
That's all for the public comment.
Okay, thank you. We move on now to the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that board members would like to pull?
Did we want to do the acceptance of donations?
Oh, did I skip that? I did completely skip that. Thank you for reminding me. Item C4, acceptance of donations. Is there a motion?
Yes, I'd like to move to accept with appreciation.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That carries unanimously. Now we move on to the consent agenda.
And on the consent agenda, you'll notice you have a revised D9, which is recommended personnel actions.
Mr. Herron.
I'd just like to point out in D2, at the bottom of one of the pages, it shows a profit of $98,000, and I think it is supposed to be $9,800.
Darn. Okay, that's it's a shame, but yes, thank you for pointing out that correction. Dr. Noel.
I guess this is a question directed to Mr. Price. Can an agenda be revised at this late date without the 72-hour notice?
Unfortunately, I missed the first part of the discussion because I was looking for the board policy, but there is that you were referring to earlier, but there is a provision that allows an item to be added to the agenda upon a vote of the board when there's a compelling need to do so. And that's separate from the emergency provisions. So
Dr. Noel, is there something you want to add to the agenda?
No, I just, this is not what
This
the
is
public saw,
this is a
right?
revision of the attachment
It's
that
the
he's
attachment,
addressing.
not the
The
agenda.
agenda item is the same. It's a revision of the attachment.
But the public hasn't had a chance to see this.
They have had the chance at the same time that we've had the chance.
We got it on Friday.
No, this, we just got it. This is brand new.
And there are copies on the side table. If you'd like to pull that for specific discussion, that would be fine.
What you can
I just
see-
wanted you to note that you did have a revision.
And the revision is simply, you see that there are four
Okay.
strikeouts.
As you know, I feel strongly that the public should have ample time and due notice to know what we're doing and to comment on it.
All right, did you want to pull item D9?
I had that on my list to pull anyway.
Okay. Any other items?
D6?
D6, yes, D6 has already been pulled.
Oh.
And we're going to bring it back at a next board meeting.
And D10.
So D6 is no longer on the consent agenda for tonight. D9, approval of recommended personnel actions dated August 6, 2009. And D10, acceptance of the recommended layoffs for California school-age families education funded positions for the 9-10 school year. Those two items have been pulled for discussion later on our agenda. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the remainder of the consent agenda?
Is there a second?
I'll
Sec-
second it.
It moved by Cordero, seconded by Deacon. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It passes unanimously.
Susan Deacon.
It was moved by, it was a tie. I heard, yeah, so I heard Deacon. We now move on to the action agenda, item E1, acceptance of the Fiscal Crisis and Management Assistance Team, FCMAT, final report on special education and approval of development of an action plan to address FCMAT recommendations, including approval of recommended additional special education expenses.
Well, 6 weeks ago, we got the final FCMAT report. The FCMAT is the Fiscal Crisis Management and Assistance Team. We hired them to take a look at our special education programs. They looked at the programs in a number of areas, identified key elements that need changing, and we are determined to make those changes. We have a set of 153 recommendations from FCMAT, and we want to spend time with the board tonight to talk about those recommendations, what we have done to date, the development of an action plan, and whether we should move ahead with some of these items since they can't all be done right now, even though we would like them to. To make that presentation, Robin Sawaski will start. I know we have Carol Miller, who is our interim administrator in special education, who will be participating in the presentation.
Okay, I'm going to start with just kind of a run-through with the agenda item, specifically for the public that doesn't have that, because I know you've all read this. As far as what Dr. Sarvis said, that on June 23rd, we were presented with the final report from FCMAT. Several of the recommendations were enacted actually before that final report was presented. After we started work with FCMAT team, and we were meeting with many of the parents and staff, we realized there were certain items that we could move forward on. And those were, we went ahead and hired our resource parent. And in front of you, I was requested over the weekend by a board member for some information on our current resource parent and what her accomplishments were. So you have that in front of you. I just received it today. And it's just a rundown of what she has done. That was Rosa Lazarovitz. She is bilingual, and it just reflects the training she's gone to, the parents she's met with. She just began the work in March and started as she got going and kind of defining what her role was. And so she's got some ideas for the further increasing her effectiveness or that role, that position. We also provided some staff training in autism, got a start on that. We have much more to do, particularly in that area. We provided a mandatory principal training, and we also had some selected staff, as many as we could get in. It was last spring. This is slightly an incorrect title here. Instead of the collaborative IEP environment, it is collaboration in the IEP environment by Nick Martin, and I have his book here, and I also have all of his PowerPoints and all from that training. It was very well received. There was a parent component of this that was, we partnered with the Alpha Resource Center, and so we provided parent training in the evening during that week. So we had them for several days, and the parents who went to that, as well as the staff, requested more. We did it kind of on a trial basis to see how he was. You know, we wanted to get the highest quality trainer. We'd heard he was excellent. Actually from parents in town and Alpha Resource Center. So we got that in place, started, just a beginning start. We initiated the new leadership team hiring process. as we, we tried to go in that perfect window. As you well know, that hiring process is still going on. We don't have our entire team at this point. And we provided some staff training in IEP best practices. So that was all before we got the final report. Then we got the final report in June, and we've had lots of work over the summer, things that aren't real apparent to the public, a lot of work internally getting ready for the new school year. Right now, just some of the highlights, does not include everything that happened, but some of the highlights are that we have a comprehensive review of the number of instructional assistants needed so that we make sure that we start this school year in compliance with the IEPs and the needs of the students. So we're looking not only just what the IEP is saying, but also what parents are expecting. And there is a letter going out to parents that is inviting them to come and meet with if there's a one-on-one instructional assistant support in place, that they will come and meet on Friday the 21st at the schools so they can meet their aide. And each school is going to send that out with the time available in the morning. We are also in the final process of hiring our instructional assistants, including some floater positions, so that we're not in that situation that we found ourselves in the past where we need a substitute and someone's just stuck in there. We want to find, a group of assistants that will be available that are trained. So, we would have that training taking place. We have a first scheduled training with Nick Martin in October 19th through 23rd. That's the beginning of that. We also, and I'm going to, I'll talk about that in a minute, because we're involving staff and parents in further developing that training plan. A letter to all the parents, and Dr. Carol Miller, our interim administrator, is in the process of writing this. A letter to all parents of special education students will be mailed prior to the beginning of the school year. The purpose is really to welcome them to the new school year, give them some contact information, and most importantly, to provide some very basic assurances. Some of those from the FCMAT report, some of those that have been goals and something that we absolutely will make happen this year, such as the 24-hour response time. So it will be brief, but I think a very good beginning step in developing, starting to develop that trust and the communication and relationships with our parents in particular. On August 17th, Dr. Sarvis mentioned we have a special education retreat. It is a voluntary retreat. We have some training going on that day. It's also a new teacher orientation day, so there will be some conflicts. We know that not everyone's going to be able to attend, but it's going to be a half day, and we're going to do some job-alike discussions. I'm going to give an update of where we are as far as in the hiring and the FCMAT report based on stuff that may come out of tonight's discussion, and generally just give some information out and question and answer time. So those teachers, for instance, there are some that are in Read 180 training that are special ed teachers. It's very important they're in their training, because that program needs to have, all of their attention and understanding how to implement it. So anyway, we realized that when we started out, there's always going to be some conflicts, but we anticipate, a group of teachers to come to that. Let's see, and the last thing, I need to call your attention to a typo that was through the secretaries helping me type this. The last one on there before plan says the California Department of Education has contracted. We have not contracted with the CDE. We have contacted CDE for technical assistance and support. And that's through Dr. Carol Miller. She has worked with CDE before in the past and has been very successful in using their help and assistance. So that's what we've done. As we get to the plan for tonight and beyond, we would like the Board of Education to first accept the FCMAT final report and approve the development of an action plan to address the recommendations. I know you all saw those 153 or so recommendations. They were not in an order that was really workable. They were put into groups, as the report went out. And we need to consolidate those into categories so that we can really have a timely way of implementing that. I know you had a copy of, and I'm going to call Dr. Miller up here, and I'll let her, as she's walking up to the podium, I'll give your attention to you have a copy of her first stab at the final plan, the implementation plan. And this is something that we would like the board to be able to look at. And then she'll describe how the stakeholders work group might work together to go forward. And then I'm going to come back after she's done that to talk about the money part.
Mr. Heron?
Maybe Carol will explain this, but you just used the first step and an action plan. Isn't this really just all the items, and the action plan will come from this?
Absolutely. This is just categorizing those items. The action plan would be developed by the stakeholder group. And
Right.
I'll let Dr. Miller explain the.
Good evening, and thank
By-
you for this opportunity.
By the way, there are many copies of this available on the side table as well.
And I did check with legal counsel. It is within the purview of the Brown Act to distribute this information to you this morning, and we also included it on the website. I do apologize because it just got there this morning. It took me a little bit longer to do it. There are a lot of 153 items, but what I found when I was cross-referencing them, that there were duplications and they appeared in different categories. So what we did was we looked at the 153 items from the report and then chose some or consolidated them into 16 different categories. And then on some of the items, they are listed in several categories. And we did not have a separate category called policies, procedures, and guidelines because those could almost fit in every single cluster area or category. So we will be addressing those in each of the areas. So there were two documents that were emailed this morning. The first document basically just listed the 153 cluster areas. And then there was a section after those, or those 153 recommendations. And then we took a legend and assigned cluster areas to those 153 items. Then what we did was we took all of those items and just reformatted them and put a cluster on each or one cluster per page or 2 pages, and then just moved all of the items around. So for example, the first cluster item is the school board cluster. And so there are a few items under that. Probably the one cluster that has the most is communication and information and resources, and a very large parent participation component. And then what we would like to do after that, and with approval of a key stakeholders work group, and this is a group of folks who will be rolling up their sleeves and taking this document by clusters and looking at the priorities, looking at any kind of duplication, who would be the responsible person or entity to implement those areas, what would the timeline be, and if there's any associated cost, if there's extra cost, in-kind cost, and we would identify that and bring that back. The key stakeholders group would be representatives from parents, and we met with the SEEK group and talked a little bit about this. We would like representatives from SEEK, as well as general ed teachers, and we would closely work with the Santa Barbara Association for choosing those teachers. They would recommend a representative to us, as well as from CSEA, recommending representation. And we would like a principal or administrator's school site, as well as district folks. And we would like to keep the group small enough, because it's going to be a working group. We would like to move very quickly and meet within the next 2 weeks so we can come back with some recommendations. And that's basically what we would like to, that's the first step. And then from this, we would develop an action plan. And we also would like to have it available in a forum type situation where we would have comments, reviews, recommendations, things like that. So it's a transparent process, because we're looking for everyone's help.
Thank you.
I don't know if maybe you should just stand there if you don't mind, because we may have some questions, and I'm going to run through just the last part of the agenda item. It is kind of a large item with lots of things on it. So then the last part of the plan is the board looking at funding for some additional recommended expenses recommended through the FCMAT report and through our interactions with the parents. And these would include continuing the parent resource position, and it came out to be about $10,000 per year. So we're looking at a 2-year period at this point, because we have our stimulus. As you can tell, we have the Federal American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, ARA funds, the stimulus money, as something that's supporting this, and those come over 2 years. We're thinking that this is about a $20,000 cost. We're also, in talking with parents, considering maybe a split kind of assignment. You've got the information from Rosa. She's, moving forward, and we're also thinking, we're just looking at that position to see how we can be most effective and reach the most parents in our special ed parent groups. So we're considering that, but our request tonight would just be to continue that position, whether it be a split or a single person. Secondly, to develop a board-approved job description. That's the most important part here. That would be leading to hiring a district ombudsman. Now, the $12,000 per year with a total of $24,000 is based on one of the recommendations we got from one of the FCMAT team members. We understand that this type of ombudsman position might be, something that we would use a lot in the beginning, because that's really a third party that's working with the parents in particular and trying to solve some of the issues, the outstanding issues, come to agreements and making some decisions. So we see that as we build our leadership team and the trust with our parents and relationships, that there might be less of a need for that outside person. But we're asking for the $24,000 to get started. We may need the $24,000 for a 1 year. And we may need to come back to you for additional funding requests if we find that this position, and as we develop the job description, is much bigger than what this represents here tonight. But I think it's a start. The third thing is to hire a third program specialist, and that runs about $100,000 per year. In looking at how we want to move forward and really impact the instructional program in our classrooms, we realize how important that program specialist piece is, that those are the people that are working with our staff on a daily basis, giving demo lessons, providing curricular support, working with principals, even working with parents. But they're really the ones who are affecting the instruction and our students' learning and support for our teachers. And then, of course, providing staff and parent training, which includes some procedural guidebooks, meaning that there's a cost of printing and all included in that. And I think we're very fortunate to have the stimulus dollars at a time in which we have so much training going on and dollars being spent from our other funding, like Title I federal funding for our instructional materials, and Read 180, which our special ed teachers are participating in fully, but this will also give us a lot of support for parent and staff training. So the fiscal impact over this is $324,000, and that's over a 2-year period. With the fact that I said about the ombudsman, that might be something that we need to look at increasing. So I'm sure you want discussion now.
Thank you. And I just want to be really clear that that's $324,000, but not from the general fund, all categorical funding.
Absolutely.
Nothing that
No
could be
impact
used
at all
for
from the general fund. None of this,
teachers.
in fact, could have been used for hiring teachers. We have people in here, and that's something that is frowned upon with one-time money, as this is 2-year, but we feel like this is such an important piece. Special ed, there's nothing more important right now to get this program and our department back in place, and so we see this as very important and moving forward. And potentially the ombudsman, for instance, was only in the FCMAT report put forward as a 1-year type of position. So that's some of this is short term, and it's very appropriate for that type of funding.
Thank you.
Could I also note that, that the board will remember that we cut the third program specialist position as part of our budget reductions in the spring, and Mr. Price may want to weigh in on this, but if we decide to hire that position using this federal era money, Robert's Rules of Orders would require us to, in the motion, to note that this is a change from the previous board action in the motion.
Thank you.
And just
yes,
follow up,
Mr.
my question also was there enough notice in the description of the item on the agenda to let the public know that we've gone from delaying 1 year at 85,000 to the point where we're going to hire one person for 2 years for $200,000? The only thing I can say that makes the difference is that it's not the same bucket of money. The previous motion was general funds. This one is special ed, so that does make it a different motion, but I was just curious on that point.
Yeah, the requirements of the Brown Act are met because of the explanation that is on the agenda. There is no requirement that an explanation which need not exceed 20 or 25 words in length be so specific that it would clarify that this is a change from an earlier position that the board took. However, and I received your question that unfortunately I didn't email you an answer to until 5 o'clock today, but having to do with Robert's Rules, it is provided that there need not be any earlier notice for a motion to amend where a majority of all of the members act positively on the matter. And of course, for your board to act, it requires a majority of all the members, as distinguished from a majority of the quorum.
I was just reading, if a measure is to be reconsidered...
Mr. Herron, you need to turn on your mic.
If a measure is to be reconsidered, rescinded, or amended at a meeting subsequent to the initial action, the intent to do so must be on the public notice of the meeting. And I'm not a parliamentarian, but I'm just wondering how that affects this.
Well, tell me, if you don't mind, what you're quoting from.
It's just purely frequently asked questions, reconsidering main motions, a local government center. I mean, I don't know the veracity of the group, but it caught my attention.
Well, believe me, I didn't know the answer to the question, your question, but you've adopted Robert's Rules, newly revised, this particular edition, the 10th edition, and in it, it talks about when a motion to amend can properly be heard. And under standard descriptive characteristics in section 35, subsection 7, it says, or C, a vote of a majority of the entire membership, whichever is most practical to obtain. And that dispenses with the notice requirements that are covered in the earlier subsections.
Yeah, and just to make it clear, my question wasn't because I disagree with what we're doing. I just want to make sure it was a correct action.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
All right, board members, I would like to go ahead and take public comment at this time. I'm going to close to public comment, and let's see how many we have.
Are there any more public comments on this issue?
If you've already turned in your slip,
Yeah,
you're
no,
set.
I've got the slips, but anybody else?
Before we start public comment, Dr. Noel, is there something that you wanted to
Well, I
chime
wanted to
in?
make some comments, but if they're not in order now, I can wait.
Can you wait till after we go ahead and take public comment? Okay.
I'll try.
How many?
5.
5. All right, so 3 minutes each.
Deborah Petland, followed by Carolyn Renard, followed by Joan Esposito.
Oh, thank you for all your hard work. I've been out of town for a month, but I can see it's been a tough month. The only reason I'm addressing you tonight is in the FIGMAT report. I know there's so many issues, but under 119 talks about nursing services. And we are a small but mighty group. You know, it's very difficult having just 4 FTOs for 20 schools. And to meet all the regular education and the special education mandates and requirements is significant. Currently with our staff, we do the best we can, but I know that we are not in full compliance with meeting all the requirements. So I know that in terms of nursing, it doesn't really look particularly like special ed, but we have a very close relationship with both regular ed and special ed. So I'm hoping to be considered in the FIGMAT plan, even though I know it's money. And I'll make sure that there's representation on the work groups. And I welcome our interim director. I was very happy to meet her this afternoon, so thank you for that. And I'm hoping we work together with the parents to improve special ed and the role of the nurse in that project. So please consider those 3 positions. Thank you.
Carolyn Renard. Followed by Joan Esposito.
I disagree with Craig Price's apparent, Dr. Miller said that she conferred with Craig Price about whether the distribution of this additional attachment is a violation of the Brown Act or not, and that he had said it wasn't. And, you know, I repeat, Mr. Price, that this attachment was sent out by email earlier today to the board members, but not to the people on the noticing list. That is a violation of the Brown Act. Are you saying it's not?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm
That is
approaching
the issue.
slowly.
But he was quoted by Carol Miller earlier as saying that this was in compliance with the Brown Act.
And I do want to remind you that your comments are to the board.
Right. Well, I'm bringing it up. If the board cares about it, they will follow through on it. I'd also like to say that I really, you know, just the way that this has been brought to the agenda, this FICMAT report, is just so typical of the way that this school district administration continues to work, and this board continues to support, with the exception of Mr. Noel, who's the only one that's actually trying to do anything about the way this administration underhandedly works. You've had 1.5 months to put the FICMAT report on the agenda and actually have a discussion about it. But no, here we are at the beginning of August. It's on the action agenda. At the last minute, there is this attachment put onto it, and the board is supposed to decide on decide on doing an action plan, having this work group, whoever that's going to consist of. I'm sure it's no one that's actually going to challenge anything. And all this 1.5 months, there could have been an actual discussion about the FICMAT report. Well, there's apparently not going to be a discussion. Oh, it's time for action now. Well, what about the discussion part? You know, this is disgusting. And this board is just this board is part of the problem. This school board, you just think this is just fine, apparently, because you're not doing anything about it, with the exception of Mr. Noel, who continues to try to do something about these disgusting practices of both Mr. Sarvis and the board. You guys, he couldn't do it without you.
Joan Esposito, followed by Lane Wheeler, followed by Corey Bream.
Good evening. I think most of us know that the FICMAT report involved, the majority of it revolved around children with learning disabilities. And they were saying that the children are coming in our district with learning disabilities and going out with personality disorders. And one of the reasons for that was that they can't read and write, and they're just being pushed through from grade to grade. And that was clear in the presentation to you from the gentleman from the FICMAT office. I don't see anything in here on teacher training on learning disabilities. I see autism, and I think it's great. But I don't see anything specific to learning disabilities, and I would like somehow someone to add that to this report and, you know, up-and-coming reports. You have a special education retreat, but, you know, none of this information is available to the public. This is all a surprise, and I'm glad. I mean, there's a lot of work gone into it. But the public they're not made aware of what's going on in the district. It's all done and then, like, presented on the last minute. The other issue I wanted to talk to you about was when you're talking about an ombudsman, 12,000 or even 24,000 a year is nothing. You're not going to get anyone to do a decent job for that. So I would rather see you don't do it than you do this kind of job, because it's just not going to work. San Diego School District has an ombudsman, and I suggest maybe some of the board members check into their ombudsman program and see how much they're paid and what they do and what the, what the duties are. But, again, I think this is a lot of work that Dr. Miller did, but I am particularly interested in the children with learning disabilities. And I really feel that as you move on, you need to include that in here, because that's the majority of the children in the district who have disabilities. The other one issue is that your voluntary event for all attendees, it shouldn't be voluntary, it should be mandatory. We need all the teachers and the principals to know about special education. Please don't accept any more voluntary events. The teachers, everyone needs to be there, including the school board members, if we're really going to address these issues of children. Okay, thank you.
Lane Wheeler, followed by Corey Bream.
Thank you, Lane Wheeler, President, Santa Barbara Teacher Association. I, too, would call on the board to look very carefully at the August 17th meeting. It's also the new teacher orientation, where teachers learn about the district, and there are a number of new hires in the special ed area. I'm very concerned that we will hamper them in terms of their ability to be functional members of our organization if they are missing out on an important orientation that tells them how to get through the minutia of any organization. So I'm concerned about that. SBTA would like to welcome Dr. Miller to the team, and we look forward to working with her. There are a number of items in here that look like they may involve contract, and we would once again look forward to being partners in the resolution of those items as we move forward. So we look forward to working with you on this, and thank you very much.
Corey Bream.
Good evening. The report's long, and the quickie version that I read was long too, so I'll try to get right through. Ready? Thank you and welcome, Dr. Miller, as I found that report refreshing. Someone both read it, put an action plan in place, and made it public. That is so refreshing and unusual. I mean, we had those interim directors for how long, and they never did this kind of thing, so I'm really pleased with that, and I want to thank you again, and thank you to the board for at least allowing me to see it before the meeting. So that being said, I have 8 items. I'm going to go as fast as I can. Ready? Autism. We have more kids coming than ever. There's a 9 times increase, so you're going to see 9 times the number of kids come into your kindergarten schools. Get ready. Spend that money and get ready. Goleta, I just heard, is opening a second program. We don't even have one. They opened it years ago. So hand slap, and yet please get ready. 9 times more children are going to come your way with autism to your kindergarten classes in the next year or 2, because the number of kids diagnosed with autism has 9 times increased. Moving on. The mandatory event for all. Absolutely. Are you crazy? These people need to learn. Most of the general ed teachers don't even have the idea that they should or ought to be caring in any way, shape, or form or educating these children, and yet you're putting them in a class that's more full. So now the teacher has more students, and percentage-wise, more special ed students, and you're not going to mandate they go to these classes to learn how to deal with this different category of children. That is absolutely ridiculous. I can't believe it's anything but mandatory. So the parent liaison, I have a problem with that. Yes, I think you should keep it on. I do not feel it was terribly productive as it was handled prior, yet she didn't really have a boss. So maybe that's part of it. Splitting it would be helpful, but hiring someone, I have a few notes on that. That person has to have a special needs kid. They can't know possibly how I feel getting up every night to handle pee and problems and emotional upset, sleeping 4 hours a night, and then having to come here with my free time. Okay? I don't think you should have anybody that doesn't have a special needs kid. I don't care if they have an IEP for a stutter or a lisp or some wee little problem. That is not the same. There was no connection. She also didn't know the law by having to experience some upset. So my opinion is it was a bad hire. And please don't repeat that hire. Should you keep that position, the position could be helpful, but the self-starter person wasn't present, in my opinion. They need to know the law. They need to stay, and someone who's going off to college and
10 seconds.
oh my God. The ombudsman needs more pay. Keep Dr. Miller as long as you can. The nurses are dedicated, hardworking, and knowledgeable. They've never been anything but great. They do need to be added. And then separate but really important, this meeting is really wrong. It should be live. It should be televised in Spanish. And the learning disabilities does need to be on the list. Bye.
Thank you. And Dr. Bream, if you want to give a copy of that to Dr. Sarvis.
I'll get it to the board members. Good.
That's all.
All right. Thank you very much. Board members, comments on the FICMAT report? Dr. Noel.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you for your public comments. I appreciate that. We spent $56,000 and countless hours of time to get this report. And the report is useful. The report has limitations as well. And what I find missing is any meaningful exchange of views about the report. There has not been an opportunity to have a workshop on the report where we can sit and in a less formal way, talk to one another, where we can hear in a less formal way from the stakeholder groups. There's not been anything, and I don't hear a suggestion for anything that I would call a visioning group or a visioning process. And that to me is one of the major deficiencies that the programs have had, a sense of vision and philosophy. I think a visioning group, the work of a visioning group precedes that of a work group. And it has to be collaborative, it has to be participatory, and it has to be very inclusive. And as we all know, and as the report points out, the district has not done well at involving and serving the needs of the lower income and Latino communities at Santa Barbara. And I think that requires special attention, special skills, special empathy to be able to get these families involved. I'm particularly concerned when I read the data, and thank you, Mr. Herron, for getting the data for us all on the survey results, because the data show what to me is a very startling level of alienation on the part of the professional education staff. And I come from an institutional environment where your staff are considered to be the core, and they are empowered in the University of California, and I think this is true, and I know it is at Penn State where I also taught. All curriculum and instruction is in the domain of the faculty, because they have the substantive knowledge and they are closest to the students. And yet what we read in the report and hear anecdotally and confidentially from some teachers who are afraid to speak publicly is that our teachers don't feel they have control over anything in special education. They don't feel that they're appreciated. They don't feel that they're consulted. And I don't want to moralize about that, although I have strong moral feelings about it. I look at that as an incredible loss of resources, because these are the people who work with the kids. These are the people who have the knowledge. If they don't have the knowledge, who does? They're on the scene. And we're not empowering them to drive the process. We don't, and I don't see in any of these plans any effort to really try to create a forum where they can speak. And that's not going to be easy because the level of trust is very low. And that too is shown in the data. I'm not fabricating this. Read the study. Okay. So what I would like to see, first of all, I think it would be a grave error to vote to accept the report if that means to accept its findings. I think its findings need to be examined, re-examined, discussed, and challenged. I think voting to accept the report in the sense that it fulfills a contractual obligation by FCMAT to this district is just fine. And I think voting to establish a mechanism where we can start a dialogue involving the whole, and a really inclusive dialogue is very important. And I'm happy to give you a list of topics that I think would be important for that. I've written a few things on this, been thinking about it a long time. What I've missed personally is I haven't anybody to talk to. We've had the preliminary report since June 23rd, and we've had the final reports, since April 28th, and the final report since June 23rd. And we've listened to one presentation by FCMAT and got to answer some questions. We now get a dialogue. Dr. Bream gets 3 minutes to say everything she's got in her mind about this. This is ridiculous. This is not dialogue. We need to include that if there's any message that has come out of this trauma, is that our program has to be collaborative and inclusive. And we're not off to a good start. This plan, and with all due respect, Ms. Sawaski, this plan is all the givens, the things that the district is going to do. I don't hear this plan anywhere in this plan that the district is going to listen. And I think we have to listen, if not as a precondition, we have to listen in contemporary time with the planning process. We have to listen and listen and listen. Thank you.
Mrs. Cordero.
Well, I was going to ask the question about what accepting the report means, because I agree with Dr. Noel that I would like to accept it in terms of it being completed. The FCMAT has completed the report. They've given it to us. We have it in our possession. And to that extent, I would like to accept it so we can move on with addressing it, looking at it, discussing it, examining whether it actually, what we get from it, maybe additional things we didn't get from it. So I would like to know if that's what accepting the report means, because if it is, then I would actually like to move to accept it and kind of get on with the discussion. So maybe I can.
You can absolutely make that motion.
Well, first of all, is that what accepting it means?
That's. Is that what you intended? But it's going to be whatever the intention of the motion maker is.
Well, my motion will be that we accept that that FCMAT has met its contractual obligations in providing us with a final report.
Second.
Is there any further discussion on this motion?
Can you repeat it?
That my motion is that we accept that FCMAT has met its contractual obligations in providing us with a final report on special education.
Maybe just a little tweak of the wording, in providing us with, rather than and.
I did say.
Did you say in? Oh, I'm sorry.
Is that clear to you?
Any other questions?
Call the question.
Well, if you call the question, then I need to take a vote on calling the question. So I'm just going to say right now, any other comments on this? All those in favor? Aye. That passes unanimously.
Okay, then I would like to address some of the things that Dr. Noel raised. I also agree that I think, first of all, I'm not sure that I see what we have in front of us as a real action plan. and so it says here that we approve a development of an action plan. So I certainly think that we do want to have an action plan, but I'm not sure that, that absent a discussion of the report, that we're ready to move on to the action plan. I think that it might be premature to develop the action plan before we've had a full discussion of what's in the report. So I certainly concur with the need to develop one, but I'm not sure we're ready to do that at this point. And then there's one more thing that I want to say. I also agree that I think we need to have what Dr. Noel termed as a workshop. I might consider a forum. I'm not sure what word we want to use, but I would really like to request that whatever public kind of meeting we have, that it be fully bilingual, so that our Spanish-speaking families are not relegated to the back of the room with someone interpreting what we are saying to them, but rather that the meeting be held in a bilingual format with everybody included.
Mr. Herron?
I have a couple of things. First, I hope when we get to the rest of these items, we handle them individually. But that's why I asked my question originally was, what was this? And it's strictly taking the FCMAT report and identifying all the things that are potential. And the development of an action plan is going to be, first step is by a stakeholder group trying to tell us, okay, as a group, which things are the most important, and then actually then approve an action plan at that point. But for us to sit here and look at 151 things and determine at this level which are the most important, I guess I would rely on a group of parents, teachers, special ed, general ed, experts, to say, okay, here's 150 items. These are the 20 most important. Let's develop an action plan on those 20 immediately and then take the next step. So I see this as a sort of going forward, hey, let's say thank you for having the 150 items. Let's say thank you for accepting the FCMAT report. And let's say yes to having this stakeholders group review all these things and help us prioritize so that we can then take action at the time it's appropriate. And I'm sure you're going to see in the categorization of all these things, the most important thing might be a focus group, a workshop, a vision plan. Those will come out of this process, and then we can decide how to do it. So I'm hoping that's the gist of this, is it's another step to go forward and isolate from these 150 which ones are the most important, and then we can take action on them. And it's going to be done by late August, if Carol, and knowing Carol, whoever volunteers for that, they're going to be working late at night, I have a feeling, or maybe all night. But I think what Carol has done has taken us a great step, or Dr. Miller, I'm sorry, has taken us a great step to get organized. And when she convenes this group, I'm sure she's going to come back with very detailed priorities, and we'll be able to look at priorities number 1 and take action on priority number 1, and not necessarily deal with priorities number 5 immediately. But that 2 weeks to do that, I think would be a great help to us. So as far as the development of an action plan to address recommendations, I think that's perfectly appropriate by this stakeholders work group.
Mrs. Deacon.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear it sounds like we're all thinking alike here. First of all, when I printed this out this morning, Dr. Miller, I looked at it, and I also was under the impression that tonight we were going to sit here and maybe work our way through these as a priority, and I was really relieved to realize that that's not the case. Because I agree, I think that this is something where if we have a community forum where we bring in all the stakeholders, brainstorm, there's so many overlapping areas. I think there will be many areas that we can find that we can collapse and identify as priorities. So I absolutely agree. I think that this is the way to go. And a couple of other things that I'd like to comment on is the notion of splitting the parent liaison. I think that is a good idea. I mean, I think that we can find resources that will be able to contribute on a variety of different levels along those lines. And I also am concerned about the fact that this meeting is not mandatory. I'm concerned on both sides. We've heard from the teachers that or, you know, from Mr. Wheeler that some teachers won't be able to attend. We know that we want all of our special education teachers to attend. We may not have the money to pay for a training. That's not it. Okay, well, is it possible to have a mandatory session?
We will absolutely have not just one mandatory session. There will be lots of mandatory sessions. This particular date was selected by teachers last spring. We looked at our beginning of the school, and every single year they told me, and I'm hearing it from the principals and from our special education staff, that every year there's a clash because the principals need to have their time with their full staff, with their professional and learning communities, working on the needs of the kids, getting their year in place, and they really resented having special education staff be pulled away on the most important part of building a new team. There's often new teachers on a staff and new kids, and they talk about that. So the special education teachers feel the same way. They feel torn. They want to be with their special education teachers and, or you know, the other staff, not just teachers, and they want to be a part of the schools in which they work every single day. So they said, you know what, let's select this first day back. We know it's new teacher training and or orientation, but what we'd like to have is just information for the veteran teachers who've been here and whoever can attend. We have people who are, you know, going to a wedding. We knew all of that. This is just one opportunity to begin the process with some of our teachers who've been in the district quite a while, giving us some of their needs again as we start the year, and just an update on where we are. It is not a training, and it's a half day, and it's very concise in the information. It's not any information that someone not coming is going to necessarily miss out on. It's stuff that, you know, will be available. So it's just our first step. We wanted to take that. We will have lots of mandatory meetings, lots of training on learning disabilities. I mean, all of the things that we've talked about, the vision, setting a vision, that's one of the recommendations. Many of the things that you were saying about what you thought were included are absolutely included. This is just a beginning jumping off point.
And because it's outside of the teacher's contract, we cannot
Make it mandatory.
them
It's
to do
not it's not in their day. We are paying for them. I mean, it's not in their calendar year. We are paying them to come if they choose to participate.
If Mr. Wheeler would like to agree to make it mandatory, we'd be happy to.
Mrs. Cordero, did you have your hand up? And then Dr. Noel?
Very briefly, I just wanted to make sure, because I wasn't clear in terms of what I was hearing, that the discussions that I feel like we have to have meetings that include the Spanish-speaking community before we move ahead with any of the planning, and that I don't feel like we even have our stakeholders group in place until we have those meetings.
Dr. Noel?
The more I think about it, I'm a little puzzled because we may not have made it very clear about what Dr. Miller is doing. Because I hear, I mean, somebody's got to keep the shop running, okay? And right now, she's the interim director or administrator. And how big is her staff right now?
She has her secretary. We have one program specialist.
Okay. And by the end of August, we'll have more program specialists?
We're hoping that. We may have an executive director. We could potentially even have a director.
And we're hoping to have an executive director on board when schools begins as well, or I haven't heard where we stand on that.
We don't have a board meeting until the day after the first day of school, so that would be impossible at this point.
Okay.
But we'll be talking more about that at the end when we're talking about upcoming
What I
board
hear
meetings.
is a person who is not full-time being given the job of taking 153, you lost 3 of our recommendations, Mr. Herron, 153 recommendations in a 52-page report with appendices, and helping us reinvent our system based on that, while in her spare time administering a program that is grossly understaffed. And I have a little trouble, and I understand that Dr. Miller is very good at doing magic, but I'm not sure that that's a reasonable request. And I'm just wondering if we might be well advised to be thinking about some division there. And because I've had one conversation with Dr. Miller, I would treasure her input on the reinventing because of her experience and insights. But I imagine that running the show would also benefit enormously from her experience. I don't know how to resolve that, but I think that we're being very unrealistic in our expectations about that, especially if we now talk about a visioning or some kind of a process. That's going to take a lot of time. I don't think one meeting somewhere is going to do it. I think you're going to have a meeting on the Lower East Side. You're going to have a meeting on the Lower West Side. You're going to have meetings 2 or 3 other places around town to really get the sense of, you're not just trying to get information, you're also trying to have people become part of something that the data tell us they've been estranged from. So I think that's a huge job.
Can I make a comment on just
Yes.
that? As far as just taking that visioning piece, I think Dr. Miller would be the first person to say that she's not the person to actually develop that vision. That would be something, she's working with the recommendations, trying to put them in an order in which we can get moving. And those meetings, the visioning process will need to have a lot of stakeholders involved in that. And our executive director and our new leadership team really need to be a part of that because they're leading the vision. So we will, I mean, Dr. Miller is an expert in many pieces of this, and she will help us and support us. But we've asked a lot of her to get this ready because we knew that there was a real desire from the board and from the public to get something ready and started. So that's why we worked double time to get this in this kind of condition for this board meeting, to get your approval to move forward as a first step, and then lots of work in getting the stakeholders involved.
I want to chime in at this
I
point.
just wanted a footnote on that
Yes, Dr.
comment. I've also been warned by both people inside and outside the district that trying to find a first-rate administrator at this time of year is really tough. That it's just, the good people are gone. And I worry about that too. And wonder if we might be well advised to rethink a little bit about those positions and the timing of them and how to perform the functions one way or another. And the functions have to be performed. It's not simply a matter of plugging pieces into a structure.
I'm a little concerned because when I hear board members talking about this, I'm sensing delays because if you're waiting for multiple workshops before you even create an action plan, that really would put off anything getting done because an action plan is just a plan. It's not even at the implementation point. So I would be very much in favor of Dr. Miller going ahead, putting together a stakeholder committee that includes a representative number of members from our Latino and our Spanish-speaking community, and being very careful about being inclusive, but being one that is of a size that can move forward quickly, looking at these 153 and simply prioritizing, what can we do quickly. When we're then talking about workshops, I also want to clarify, because there are lots of limitations to board meetings. They're just the same limitations to board workshops, except for we're sitting in a different position, essentially. So I want to be clear that we're talking about district workshops that board members could attend and perhaps, be present at but not speak, so that they can gather the information at. But I'm concerned because board workshops, what I really think we need is input from the community at this point, and not something where they're going to have limitations on the time to speak or a limitation on turns and things like that. So what I would really hope is that out of the action plan, but again, it's going to come out of the stakeholder group, that some of the first things we do right after school starts are start having workshops to talk about FCMAT, to talk the report, to talk about how the action plan is coming along, what the all those things that I know that we have parents and staff members that want to talk about, but they can't in the more formal environment of a board meeting. So those are my concerns along those lines. Mrs. Cordero?
Well, I understand your concerns because a board workshop has to adhere to the same Brown Act regulations that a board meeting has to. But the board workshop doesn't have to adhere to the same format as a board meeting does. And we can determine what format we want to set up for the workshop. So I think we wouldn't necessarily have to have time limits, or certainly not the same kind of time limits on public input that we normally do at a board meeting. It could be a much freer flow of, or exchange of ideas. The concern that I would have about having it just be a district workshop rather than a board workshop is that part of what I feel, and I think I've heard some colleagues expressing this too, is that we are bound by the Brown Act that we can't have a discussion either. So we have not been able to discuss with any of our colleagues any of our ideas about this. So I feel like a board workshop would allow us the opportunity to not only have that exchange with the public, but also have that exchange with each other that we might not be able to do if it were a district workshop.
Mr. Herron?
Yes, I'd like to try one more time. If we have a district, any kind of workshop, and we've got 153 items to talk about, it will be chaos. I want to suggest that this work group convene to review the categories of recommendations, consolidate any duplicates, identify responsible entities for implementation, and establish a suggested priority timeline. We can then look at it and have a workshop on the first 10 items and really focus on the first 10 items, the first 20 items, and take it step by step. But to all of a sudden next week have a workshop where we sit down and we talk about 153 items, it's chaos.
I agree with you on that one, Mr. Herron. Mrs. Deacon?
I do too, and I have to say, although we may not have spoken to each other about these specific items or the report individually, we've thought a lot about it. And I know that I am also ready to get the stakeholders involved, because I think that we may know where we're going to land on a lot of these things, but I think we've all expressed a commitment to get the input for the stakeholders so that they can help us develop this mission and this vision. And actually, if you look at items 55 on here and on 103, we see that the board is being asked to approve a vision statement policy that would be developed by parents, staff, and community. So that's our stakeholder group, and they're closest to it. And so I personally would like to have that come to me. And then perhaps if we have a board workshop and we want to, tweak it, although I have a lot of faith in the parents and the staff and the community in terms of their being able to help us winnow this down. So that would really be my preference. And I also don't want to put the brakes on the hiring process either, because I do think that we're a ship kind of at sea a little bit right now without the leadership that we want. And Dr. Miller is doing a terrific job, but we know she may not be able to stay with us indefinitely, and so I don't want to stop anything in its tracks. I want to keep this thing moving forward, and everything that we do, all the steps that we take, we need to be proactive about.
Dr. Noel?
Yes, I like what Dr. Miller's done as well, but by definition, there's one thing that if it becomes the framework for the discussion, then we don't get to talk about things the FCMAT report may not have talked about, but that may flow from its data, like the empowerment of professionals. I would like also, I believe that the tripartite organizational structure was off the shelf and unrelated to the findings. And I offered as first evidence that it was done before the report was done by months, and could not have taken into account the research. But also, when you read the findings, and read the data, and read the research, and then you read 2 directors and a super director, is sort of like they don't fit together. It doesn't, that structure does not address some of the functional problems that are identified in the report. Now, you don't have to take my word for it, I'm making you uncomfortable, I think, but I think that's a conversation that needs to be had, and I know that I'm not the only person that sees it that way. And I'd hate to see us adopt a framework for discussions that precludes that kind of conversation.
Well, it's very clear that we need to have multiple conversations. Mrs. Cordero?
I also want us to move ahead with this, but I just want to point out that our meetings up to this point, well, including this one, have not been conducted bilingually. These meetings are not televised in Spanish, and therefore I think the Spanish language, the Spanish-speaking community is way behind. We don't have a fully bilingual website, so I think the Spanish-speaking community is way behind in terms of their ability to participate in this process in a fully informed way. So to begin establishing a stakeholders group when a large section of the community has really been left, not intentionally and not entirely, but to a great extent been left out of this process up to this point, really puts them at a disadvantage.
Mr. Herron?
I was going to compliment staff, and Dr. Sawatsky left off in her report that the website was redesigned. Spanish language is now much more predominant. A yeoman's job was to get this whole FCMAT report in Spanish almost overnight. So I think the staff has done a great job in at least implementing some changes even before the report to make sure that the Spanish language people have a much better access to information. They can be represented on this first stakeholders group. Keep in mind, as I interpret it, this first stakeholders group is very myopic in what it's going to do. And so one of the items might be a vision. Well, according to FCMAT, that vision plan could take a year. That could be a totally different set of stakeholders doing that. And you can go through all those items that they come up with recommendations. It's not going to be the same stakeholders group on every single thing. You're going to have stakeholders groups based upon what the priorities we determine. You'll have several stakeholders groups looking at these things, and obviously, I think there'll be ample time to hold workshops, hold discussions, hold community meetings, based upon what the priorities are. And we have to establish those priorities, but Dr. Miller and her group will help us formulate those priorities.
Well, at this point, I would like the board to start taking action on this item. The first, Mr. Herron, you want to do the first part? I would like to see.
I'll make a motion that we
Yeah.
convene a stakeholders group to review the categories of recommendations, consolidate any duplicates, identify responsible entities for implementation, and establish a suggested priority timeline.
May I make a suggestion for a slight tweak to that?
Sure.
And that is that it be a representative stakeholder group, so that it includes our Latino and our Spanish-speaking families and the whole range as well.
I presume that as a fact,
Okay.
but probably not a good presumption maybe, but I hope that is the intent on all these things we do.
So just for clarity, it's the statement that is on it's the second paragraph of the plan, adding a representative stakeholders and establish a suggested timeline.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's a motion,
I would second that motion.
and there's a second. Yes, Dr. Noel.
I'd like, I was hoping not to have to amend it, but I would like to move amendment. And the amendment is that stakeholders themselves will participate in the composition of the stakeholder groups. That it will not be appointed unilaterally by the district.
Okay, that could be in the.
I
go ahead.
want a little clarification on that, Dr. Noel, because I could foresee problems with that. If you just, I mean, it needs to be a group effort that includes the district, because certain stakeholders may not know about other stakeholders, if you see what I'm saying.
Well, I believe they're a better network than you might realize, and I think we need to, first and foremost, exhaust those social networks so that they feel empowered in this process. The last thing we need is for the district, in fact, it's like the beginning of the kiss of death. If the district appoints the people on these groups, absolutely wrong way to go.
I agree with that, and actually, it's not here, it could be in the motion. Our intention was that each of the stakeholder groups identified in the report and who we know to be, they would select their representative or representatives, maybe in some cases, that would be on the committee. We're not gonna go to the SEAC group or our bilingual or Spanish-speaking parents and say, we would like you to serve here. We're asking the group, you're right, there's a strong network, and we know contacts, we know people to contact and say, please give us your representatives that are willing to work on this. That can be in the motion, but that is absolutely the intent from the very beginning.
I'd like
That's
to
how
have it
you
in-
get
I'd like to
stakeholders.
have it in the motion.
And so what wording would you add to the motion?
God, don't ask me to repeat that.
No, I didn't understand it, so.
A representative stakeholders work group selected by, representatives selected by the stakeholder group itself, or something like that?
You could say self-selected.
Auto-generating stakeholder group.
Let's try
We'll We'll invite the stakeholders to recommend a volunteer?
That's that's the intent. So I would say self-select, representative stakeholders group with membership, with self-selected membership. Is that? That is an amendment by Dr. Noel at this point. Is there a second on the amendment?
I'll second his amendment.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Now we're back to the main motion, right?
And now we're back to the main motion, which has now been amended.
Okay. More amendments.
Okay, Dr. Noel, what's your
Well,
next?
this is all happening very spontaneously, and,
Mhm.
you know, and we're not having time to really reflect on this. But one thought does enter my mind, and I'm thinking particularly of teachers. And it's very clear from the FCMAT data and very clear from anecdotal data and personal conversations that there needs to be some provision for them to provide confidential input to this group. And I don't know how. I could, you know, in 5 minutes of conversation, probably think of how, but right now, it's just a principle.
You're not talking about the self-selection process, you're talking about the group that's working on identifying the top priorities?
It's an interaction, because I can tell you that an attitude that you hit among teachers is, what the hell difference does it make? It's not gonna matter, they're not gonna listen. Well, that teacher is someone we need to listen to. But that teacher's not gonna spill their guts, or his or her guts, publicly.
Mr. Herron.
I would hope that Dr. Miller, in the original session you're going to have the 17th, with the teachers, could make it very clear that she's open to private sessions, discussions, and she'll keep it as confidential as legally possible.
Well, but forgive me, Mr. Herron.
Well, but it could be announced that she is available for those discussions.
We'll make sure that happens.
Forgive me, but I think that, and this is absolutely no comment on
Miss
Dr.
Dr.
Miller,
Noel.
but she wears the wrong hat. And in fact, this is the kind of thing ombudsmen do.
All right, Dr. Noel has suggested that we add a confidentiality wording to the amendment.
Access to an ombudsman. You know,
Which we
have
may
an
or may not.
ombudsman
Is there a
conduct that
second to Dr. Noel's motion on this? Okay, that amendment dies for lack of a second. We have the amended main motion on the table at this point, on the floor, so let us go ahead and take a vote on that. And maybe we can go ahead and have Mrs. Sawaski repeat that back out to us at this point.
We need a second on that
Right, it
original
failed.
motion. The original
Oh, the
motion.
original motion? No, there was a
There
second.
was Heron and Deacon.
Oh, thank
Heron, yes. The way I have it is a representative stakeholders group, work group, with self-selected membership will convene to review the categories of recommendations, consolidate any duplicates, identify responsible entities for implementation, established a suggested timeline.
Suggested priority timeline.
Suggested priority. Do you want to put the other part, the stakeholders group will complete the work by late August? Not
No.
that part,
No.
okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
It carries 4-1.
you know, in comment, I would think Dr. Miller is the closest thing we have to an ombudsman at the moment. She has no skin in the game. She's not going to be here. I think people can free to tell her what they want, and she'll deal with it, and I have total faith that she can handle that aspect of what you're looking for.
At this time, I'd like us to address the funding.
Well,
Dr. Noel.
in responding to Mr. Herron, one of the features of the Ombudsman institution is that the Ombudsman has direct access to board members.
Yeah.
And if that's implied in what you're saying, then I have no quarrel.
I think in the next 2 weeks, we're not going to have one. She's the closest thing we have, and I think she'll do what needs to be done.
Thank you.
And if we're going to keep
Mrs.
throwing
Cordero?
around this title, can we find a gender-neutral term to use, please?
Ombudsperson. At this time, let us go ahead and see if we want to take action on reserving the $324,000 in Federal American Recovery and Reinvestment Act funds for the parent resource position, a district ombudsperson, a third program specialist, and provide staff and parent training, including procedural guidebooks. Mr. Herron.
I would suggest we take the 4 items separately.
We can do so. Is there a motion on the first item, parent resource position?
I didn't hear Mr. Herron.
He would like to take each position separately.
Each of the 4 bullet points separately.
Is
What are we being asked to do?
To
I wanna hear
approve the
this again.
funding for additional recommended expenses for the 09-10 and 10-11 school years that include, the first one is continue parent resource position, $10,000 per year for $20,000 total over the 2 years. Is there a motion to continue the parent resource position?
Well, to me, I can't vote on that because it's a constant sum game, and I think that the amount of money for the ombudsman is at least 2/3 smaller than it should be.
Mrs. Deacon.
Oh, well, I like Mr. Herron's notion of taking them one at a time. Is there not a reason we can do that?
Well, then the sum can go up?
It could go up.
It could, depending on what we make our decisions about.
Yeah. So is there a motion on the parent resource position?
Well, Dr. Noel makes a good point, because it could be decided if you increase the ombudsman person, then you might want to reduce the parent resource person position. So I don't know, maybe decide which one you want to take first. Maybe there should be another one that should be taken first.
All right, board members, which one would you like to take first?
I'd like to move to take the ombudsman first. Ombudsperson first.
Mrs. Cordero?
Well, I'm just wondering if this is, how this fits in with the idea that the board just approved, of having a sort of a steering committee to come up with an action plan to set priorities. Are we interfering with that by adopting these as priorities before that group has a chance to meet?
I see your point, Mrs. Cordero.
Yeah,
Yes, Mrs.
I
Deacon.
agree. I mean, I think we're kind of, to be honest with you, and this may not be completely popular to say, but I think we're moving too fast on the ombudsperson. I had a really interesting discussion with staff at UCSB today, which has an office of ombuds people. And, you know, the real formula here is an ombudsperson, is...
You just say ombuds.
Ombuds, okay. There we go. Thank you. That's a person that may not have to be accountable to anyone and therefore are very independent, but they also don't have any power to act. And if we are trying to hire a management team, I have a real hard time envisioning moving the kind of the locus of discontent off to an ombud, and then that person not having any power, decision-making power. Ultimately, I want to see our management team address these issues, and if we find that our management team is incapable of addressing them, then maybe that's the time to go to this position. But I actually think it's way too soon.
Mr. Herron?
Yeah, my question was, which is the driving force? Develop a description that fits $12,000 or do a job description and then determine what the cost is. I did get an email from Mr. Gillespie, and I'll read it, because I've been asking from day one what his thoughts were. The OBSBUDS is a great possibility. We see the position as a one-year position, could be part-time, but needs to be legal person. High-level position hired by the board, reports to the board, would be a 100,000 to 150,000 position FTE. This has really got me, because I asked for a job description. Could get job descriptions as a sample from the Department of Corrections, who use these positions in prison systems. So I think the 12,000 versus Mr. Gillespie, 100 to 150 full-time, I think we need to decide what the person is and then decide if we have the money. And all these items are going to cost money. Until we get the report that has the estimated costs, you're going to have to balance where the money's going to come from. And I'm just not sure that this position, especially at the 12,000 a year or even 24,000, is a wise move at this time.
What I'm hearing from the board is that they would probably like the action plan developed further and more information about roles like the ombuds position, and that at this time I don't sense a desire to take action on these positions. Yes? All right. Mr. Herron?
Are you talking all of them or just the OMSBUD person?
I'm talking all of them.
Well, I'm going to step in on the third program specialist. I think that's a very important part of the team, and I would like to maybe support that third program specialist.
Mrs. Deacon?
I actually feel that way as well, and I think that would maybe be a good, effective use of the funding, the recovery funding. So I was leaning towards endorsing that.
Shall we take, is there somebody that would like to make a motion on that position in that case?
I'll move that we go ahead to hire a third program specialist.
And what was the wording supposed to be in that?
Oh, amend the previous.
Let's defer to Craig Price on this, because we did have to note that it's a change from the action taken by the board in the, I believe it was June 23rd meeting?
No.
I think it was June
16.
16.
Thank you.
It was item H under this, under the FCMAT report agenda. And so I would suggest that a motion in this regard first be made that would amend the board's previous action to withhold on appointment of this person.
I'll make that, we've already have a motion.
Well, Mrs. Deacon, do you want to just clarify your
I can
motion?
amend mine. All right. I move to amend the previous motion, item H, which eliminated the third program specialist position, and at this time move that we reinstate the third program specialist.
Could I ask you to specify that it comes from American Recovery and Reinvestment?
Yes, and that it would be linked to the American Recovery and Reinvestment funding.
Something's
yes,
been bothering me.
Mr. Smith.
Can you clarify that that's the IDEA component of that?
Okay.
There's
Good
actually
point.
three
Good
different
point.
buckets. There's the
Yes.
unrestricted bucket, there's the Title I bucket, and there's the IDEA, which is the
Okay.
federal special ed funding component of special ed.
All right. So the language would be that the funding of this third program specialist would come from the IDEA segment of funding from the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act funds.
That's a motion. Is there a second?
A second, I presume you're talking about the 200,000, the 2-year obligation.
Yes, yes.
Any further discussion on that? Mrs. Cordero?
Well, I just want to reiterate that I'm going to vote against this, not because I don't think that a third program specialist is important, but because I am concerned that we have approved a group to meet and set priorities, and then we're encumbering funds before we know what their priorities are. And if they were to come back to us and have priorities that required additional funding, we would perhaps not have the funds to cover that, having already approved them for this. So, I'm optimistic that they'll be coming back to us reasonably soon. I would prefer to wait, but that's just an explanation of my vote.
Would you like to have Eric Smith talk about that funding at all? We do have lots of
Yes.
funding, but
Yes,
it would be
Mr.
good to
Smith.
get a dollar amount.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, I wouldn't want to say it's carte blanche, but I would say it's robust. So you're not bumping up against the ceiling by taking this action by any means.
Dr. Noel?
I concur with Mrs. Cordero, and I would be more comfortable looking at this with all the interrelations between the possibilities rather than taking it out piecemeal. Every time you make a piecemeal decision, you constrain the next decision, and it's inevitable, and it will come back to bite us.
Mr. Herron?
Yeah, I'd like to relate my discussion with Mr. Gillespie at the meeting. He said this third program specialist is more important than an ombudsman person. It was part of the original recommendation that we approved already. We've already approved this originally. We only took it out because it was a monetary decision, taking money out of the general fund, unrestricted funds. This method goes right back to following the FCMAC report, and we're fortunate to have a bucket of money that we can use for this purpose. And remember that it's to hire people. And this is two people in the secondary district to handle a huge number of people. And to have two people on board, ready to go to carry out the FCMAC recommendations, I think is a very positive move.
All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
No.
The motion carries 3-2. And with that, we are finishing item E1, and we will take a
How
15-minute.
about the fourth item there?
Oh, I'm sorry. Was there somebody that wanted to make a motion on any of the other items that were on the list?
I think those are better left till after our stakeholder group convenes.
Okay. With that, we will go ahead and take a 15-minute break. No objection from the board.
We do not have Title II funding available or Title I available for special ed training, because that's all going, which some of our special ed instructors will benefit from the Read 180 training and the SB 472 and all, but we were planning to use part of this stimulus funding specifically designed for IDEA, for special education, for training. And so this means that we will not even be able to start any training. Now, there is a board meeting on the 25th, but this work group won't be done by then. So if we're really going to wait to start maybe you want to look at a lower amount. This is a 2-year amount, but something to start training, that's one of the, I think we all agree our aides need training, our teachers need training. That's huge in my book.
So board members, given that information, would anybody like to make a motion on providing staff and parent training perhaps for 1 year instead of 2 years?
So move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I didn't hear the motion.
The motion is to provide the staff and parent training, including procedural guidebooks, for $40,000 over 1 year, as opposed to $80,000 over 2 years. Again, it comes from the IDEA portion of the.
I vote for that.
And I think the key thing here is we're approving the funding, but the frame and the format that the training takes will evolve as we get a better understanding of how to implement that.
That's correct.
Okay, that motion carried unanimously. And now, with no further objection from the board or from staff members, we will go ahead and take item E2, approval of the development of a memorandum of understanding with the City of Santa Barbara to contract for crossing guards and approval of funding of crossing guards for partial school year coverage for the 09-10 school year.
This was an item that was cut as part of the budget reductions on the part of the city. We've been talking to our sites about how to handle this, and we think that for some of these positions, we need to fund it until we can come to a longer-term solution. Eric Smith, our deputy superintendent, will make this report.
well, we, meaning the district, got notice of this kind of at the 11th hour. It would have been easier to contemplate during our budget development process. So this was one of the things that was waiting upon my arrival when I got back from vacation. What a joy. So in any event, I had the opportunity to talk to Deputy Chief Frank Mannix about what this would entail, what it might look like, and whether the city would be amenable to entering into a memorandum of understanding, since they already had this position on their books, and we know we neither wanted the liability nor the operational burden of creating new job descriptions for crossing guards. So my concept was to enter into an MOU and basically give them a lump sum to basically operate the program, at least on a one-time basis, for the 9-10 year, and then I think Kate Parker mentioned that we would try and work collaboratively or negotiate with them to maybe take it back over in the following year or look at some kind of collaborative. So they were amenable to that with the caveat that, you know, they had the people that they could reinstate, but in the event that they had somebody that was absent, we'd have to cover somehow. They were also able to provide us a list of the current crossing guards, and basically their traffic engineers had kind of looked at, you know, what the practicality of was relative to keeping all of those sites or crossing guard sites, or whether they could be scaled down. And I think it was the deputy chief's perspective that they could be scaled down, but that's kind of out of our area of expertise. So the first step would be entering into an MOU. We have the payroll costs. They budgeted about $112,000 last year. And then it was kind of the burden was imposed on me to find the money. So fortunately, with Meg's help, we scoured the budget today in the elementary district. And we noted that one of the things that's not included on the revenue side is that there's no MA. And as you recall, MAUD was medical administrative activity dollars, which are unrestricted, which are federal dollars, were basically scheduled to go away. There was regulations that were promulgated that would basically end that program, and then there was a moratorium placed on those regulations. And then as part of the Obama administration's packages that went through last fall, or I believe last fall, basically what happened is those regulations that were being proposed were withdrawn. So that means that basically MA is still alive. And so we think, based on our historical practice of claiming MA and the fact that we actually are going to look at using a different vendor to do it, we can probably more than cover the cost of this. And so that would be the offset, and it would be cost neutral.
Thank you. Board members? Mrs. Deacon?
Well, it's clearly an essential function, and I'm sorry the city is not going to be paying for it, and I hope that they will come back to this, but I don't see how we can let our students travel to school without some kind of safe crossing. And, one could speculate about volunteers and think about all kinds of PTA activities, but the reality is we need people that we know are going to show up day in, day out, and I think to hire people to do it is the only way you can assure that. So I would definitely lean towards supporting something like this.
Dr. Noel?
I agree with Mr. Deacon. However, I'm troubled by D6. I'll tell you what, that's our $40,000 contribution to the rec department. And it's sort of like we're still giving ours, and they're pulling back theirs. And I'm not all that comfortable with it.
I think you're actually, I'll let Robin speak to that issue, but as the state's budget has impacted all local entities, I think you're seeing the new paradigm. We started to see that with the DA and the truancy program last fall. We're seeing it here, and I don't think you've seen the last of it. So it's going to make us really look at some of our collaboratives and what we do with other public agencies probably a little bit harder.
I do want to add to that piece, and I know we will address this item. I don't know if I can be talking about this.
I wouldn't talk about
Let's
D6
not
at the
talk
time.
about.
Thank you. Any other board member comments? My issue with it was that I was really disappointed that the city didn't do more outreach to the community, because I feel like parents really had no idea that this was coming up. And I do see it as a public safety function that is appropriate for the city to cover. There are many cities in California that do so, but ultimately it is the district's final responsibility for student safety. And with things like PTA groups, just as the district didn't want to take on liability, there's no way that I as a parent would have let my child do any sort of assistance, and just as a general member of the public, I would have been uncomfortable because some of our crossings are quite dangerous, and I really I admire our crossing guards because they do a yeoman's job for our students, and they put themselves at risk for our kids in some places every day. So I'm very much in favor of moving forward with this. Is there a motion on it?
Yeah, I move to approve it.
Second.
There's
That's under protest, but I do
yes,
move.
I see. Yeah, and I do hope that we will collaborate with the city over the coming year with some more partnership solutions to
When
it.
is our next joint city council meeting?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Do we,
Rhetorical- rhetorical
we will,
question.
we will definitely have that on the agenda. But so there's a,
I will talk about that later.
okay.
It won't be for some time. We have new city council members coming on board.
There is a motion and a second to approve the development of a memorandum of understanding with the city of Santa Barbara to contract for crossing guards and approval of funding for those crossing guards for partial school year coverage for the 09-10 school year. All those in favor?
Aye.
That carries unanimously.
Craig, you know what you're doing tomorrow.
Working on an MOU. Thank you, Mr. Price. Item E3, board action on student expulsion case number 09/10-01.
I would move that we accept a stipulated one school year recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining?
Recused
Abstain.
because I was not there.
Yeah, okay. So the motion carries 3-0 with 2 abstentions for absence. Moving on to the conference agenda, item F1, update on fiscal year 2009-10 state education budget.
Well, this is just a preliminary report, but with the state budget, board members and all of us are anxious to know the effect on the district. Eric Smith will talk about that, and we'll be bringing a more complete agenda item together or forward in the future. We will also have to provide a 45-day response to the state budget.
Thank you, Dr. Sarvis. On July 28th, the governor signed the budget into law, and actually, the budget is really a revised June budget of the original February budget. And you think that's convoluted, wait till you hear what I say next. It was actually an attempt to close the $24 billion budget deficit at the state level, which I think, as most parties know, wasn't really closed. We probably see about $8 billion worth of gimmickry there. You know, the common terminology in Sacramento is it's a kick the can budget. They kick the can down the road. I think it's our anticipation that we'll see revenues basically get out of alignment with expenditures probably in the next 3 to 4 months, and we'll be dealing with this all over again, and hopefully not on a mid-year cut basis, but that could be a probability. The budget as we see it, even though the deficit to the revenue limit is a slight bit higher, it closely approximates the May revised budget, or it's what I should call is the governor's revision of the May revised budget that we based our budget on. However, there's some significant structural differences, and I'll try to explain those in a clear and coherent manner. Probably the first thing that alarmed us was that, as you know, in the Tier 3 categoricals, which we receive on an unrestricted basis, in an attempt to basically lower the Prop 98 floor, and the reason they do that is anytime you can reduce the floor of Prop 98, the floor becomes the floor in the following year. If you can depress it, then the entitlement that the state owes local school districts is less. Well, in kind of a bizarre series of accounting gimmicks, What they've done is they said, we're going to take the balance of tier 3 categoricals that we have not apportioned to you. And, you know, when we get our money, we don't get it all at once. We get it in installments, which we call apportionments. We're going to take the balance of those apportionments in the current year, which is 8-9, which is about $1.6 billion. And by doing that, we can reduce the floor. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take in 9-10, we're going to reduce your revenue limits by $250 per ADA, or a like amount of 1.6 billion. But then we're going to give it back to you to basically restore what we stole from you in the prior year. And that's just a mechanism to reduce the floor. The deficit's a little bit greater. We'll be bringing back multi-year projections at the next board meeting, so we can look at those on a multi-year basis and how that will affect us both in the elementary and secondary district. We'll also have revised projections relative to assessed valuation growth and how that affects property taxes vis-a-vis our basic aid status in the elementary, which still looks like we're on track. Secondary district looks like our AV is growing a little bit greater than what we thought, but it hasn't changed our projections radically relative to when we think we'll lurch into basic aid status. The other things that I think are kind of notable differences from the May revised budget is that there's a provision in the state budget that we can sell real property and use it, the proceeds, for unrestricted purposes for a period of 3 years. And we can reduce our reserve level down to 1% in the next year, as long as we show an effort to restore it to its full 3% by 11/12. Instructional materials like textbook adoptions have been suspended even for PI schools. So those are a number of things that weren't in the last budget. Most of the flexibility provisions have remained the same. And so other than that, not a whole lot of difference. So our big challenge right now is basically just plugging in the new numbers into the multi-year, taking a look at where that puts us in the elementary and secondary, and we hope to have the first snapshot of that at the next board meeting. And I'm happy to answer any questions if I can.
Mr. Herron.
Do we know enough about the selling of property as to what that 3-year period is? Is it 3 years from the time you sell it, or is it the next 3 years and you better sell it fast?
It's a 3 fiscal years. It's 9, 10, 10, 11, 11, 12.
Okay, so
it's within those 3 years.
It takes you a year and a half to sell it.
Yeah, what I don't know is whether it suspends any of the, protocol provisions in terms of offering it to other public agencies, and I really haven't done a lot of research on that because nobody's asked me to yet.
Any other questions or comments at this time? It sounds like there's still a lot of information to find out, so hopefully.
Right, we'll be attending the school services workshop on the budget next week, and then we'll be bringing back probably, given the time frame, a PowerPoint presentation, and we can talk in length at that time.
Thank you. Moving on to item F2. This is the first reading of proposed changes to board policies and administrative regulations pertaining to inter-district transfers in the Santa Barbara secondary and elementary school districts, including review of proposed new board policy 5117, inter-district attendance.
And we've been here before. Robin Sawaski, our Associate Superintendent for Education, will make this presentation.
Okay, yes, leading off of what Eric just talked about with the fiscal situation, and as you know, the elementary district is predicted to go into basic aid. We probably will be certified, or whatever is that the term? I don't know, in next February, when the enrollment is clear. Last February, the board made the move by blocking transfers, inter-district transfers. March 10th was when our board policy was adjusted so that we had a separate elementary inter-district and a different secondary inter-district. It's time to look at that in light of the fact that we predict the secondary district will be dropping into basic aid very soon as the next school year, like a year from now. We would put actions in place, so that fiscally that it makes a good good decisions, just like the elementary district. I do have Meg ready to provide you with data on that, numbers of students and money and all. The plan, of course, would be that we would discuss that, look at that, and we have provided here then some first reading of what the policy might look like based on what we did with the elementary district. So I'm assuming you would like some information first. I don't know if that's true or not.
Yes, I think so.
Can I clarify one thing?
Mhm.
Even though we would go into basic aid status in 10-11, you would not become basic aid until 11-12 because of the prior year guarantee.
And I'd like to clarify just one more thing, that in 9-10, due to this $250 per ADA, the high school will go into basic aid for 1 year and then pop out. And if the inter-district transfers do not go back to their districts, we go back, we stay in revenue limit. And if they do go, we pop back into basic aid. So we're playing ping pong.
Thank you.
But at this point in time, our estimated amount of children in the secondary district that would be rescinding their inter-district transfers would be about 282.
And that's 7th through, current 7th, for 09-10, I should say. That would be the 7th through 10th graders, because you would keep the 09-10 11th graders that would then be going into 12th grade? Is
Okay.
that, according to this policy?
Well-
What numbers did you include in the 282?
Okay, the numbers that I average, because I have three types of documents in front of me, come from 3 different sources. So in 8-9, we had 352 inter-district transfers, 7 through 12. If you remove those 12, or those 85 12th graders, and say you're going to get the same amount of 7th graders in that we have, that would bring us to about 317. What we have in ARIES for 9-10, which is our attendance software, so the people that we've counted in there, we should have 245 kids, ADA. Then, if you actually get the pieces of paper that have come into our office, for 9-10, we have 282. What I did is I added those 3 together, divided them by 3, and got an average of 282.
Okay.
It's very scientific.
Board members, you've had the opportunity to look through the proposed changes. Mr. Herron.
I'm concerned about, I guess the document that says red line. I'm not quite sure what red line means, but, because mine had no red lines on it. But number 3 on page 1, where it talks about exemptions, and it lists a lot of students enrolled in academies, et cetera. Do we know, number 1, how many students we're talking about there that would be exempted? And I guess I would ask, why exempt certain categories on this? Because it may not be representative of the student body. And in fact, it may be disproportionately, different. So I wonder where that came up and why are we including that in a potential change?
Let me respond to your first comment about the red line. That's my fault. When we were trying to get this in for the agenda last Friday morning, I asked for the production of a red line as opposed to a clean draft, and what we produced was a red line showing the changes from the previous draft as opposed to a red line showing the changes from existing policy. So forgive me. And I would say in terms of your second question, this exercise of putting together some of this language was intended to allow the board to grapple with the policy issues and to discuss among yourselves and decide what types of exceptions, if any, you wanted to have go in, as opposed to anybody's particular recommendation to you that this necessarily was the best way to go.
Yeah, and that's what I guess I can't tell what the reason for this was, or who did it, or why. So if anybody can tell me, I'd like to know.
Well, since I wrote it, I guess I should step up to the plate on that, because I had conversation with staff about what types of exceptions, if any, ought to go in for the board to look at and bounce around that would go beyond what you did for the elementary district. And obviously, we have a situation where you have students who are in and committed to unique academic type programs, and we wanted to provide a vehicle for you to discuss what you wanted to do with those students, along with 12th graders, along with students that were threatened with the loss of eligibility if they returned to their district of residence, so that you could direct staff and me as far as how you wanted this thing written. I also think that there was an interest in getting this before you with some specifics in mind that would help you to focus on the particular issues rather than just throwing everything up on the wall and saying, you tell us what you want.
Okay.
Mrs. Deacon.
I'd like to address that a little bit. I didn't talk to anybody about this, but it seems to me that some of these programs, maybe all of them, are building programs, and that from the perspective of the staff, they're building teams of students that begin a continuum of learning that then has its fruition in some kind of competition or, ultimate goal. The Health Academy, certainly those students, the instruction they get is incremental, and it's building upon it to a final goal. So to me, it makes sense to keep those students in those programs until they graduate, the ones that are there now. The other thing that occurred to me, though, that this policy is primarily focused on the junior highs and high schools, because that's what we're contemplating now. But we also will have some programs like the IB program at Harding, for instance, where potentially we might have families that are attracted there because of that specialized program. And when we get down to what is now item 5, I guess, where we're talking about the maximum fixed number of openings, I suspect we picked maximum because we didn't want to go over a certain number, but if there were potential openings, say late in the summer where, if someone, say at a Harding said, I've got a few extra slots, we could accommodate a student. That might be a possibility as well, because it's access to a specialized program they couldn't get elsewhere.
Mr. Herron.
Yeah, interdistrict on the elementary is pretty clear. You have to be almost dead to get in. So there are no exceptions right now. We don't take anybody. So it's not even if Harding has the best program, interdistrict people aren't going to get into that unless we want to change that policy.
And I do want to be clear that this policy is now would be for both elementary and secondary. This would be inclusive. Any other comments, either on point 3 or on other parts of it?
Well, I would like to know how many students we're talking about, what their makeup is, who are they, and is it disproportionately towards one group of people that we're giving a privilege to?
Mrs. Cordero.
Well, I'm interested in, because the students take a specialized curriculum when they're in these academies, I'm interested in how it would affect their academic progress should they have to transfer back to their home district. Would they be at a disadvantage in terms of completing their academic progress?
I could get more information for you. However, I believe not. All of these programs, although there might be a piece of it that goes along with, the engineering, for instance, or the visual arts, they have to take college prep type, the A through G requirements for the math and the English, and is that what you're talking about?
Well, yes, but I realize that they have to meet all the requirements. I was just wondering if they take them out of sequence, or if they take them in kind of a different combination where when they went back to their home district, it wouldn't be a seamless transfer.
You know, I don't think that would be an issue. And I'm speaking, even if you weren't in an academy, sometimes different schools and districts have a different sequence. And, you know, just from my own experience being a principal, you have to fit children in, students in, and make it happen for them and figure it out.
Dr. Noel?
I don't fully understand five, or the number 6. It sounds like an unlimited, we call them at the university silver bullets. The chancellor has silver bullets to hand out as deemed useful. Is that what that is?
Are you talking about this optional one? Yeah, that's strictly an optional one, and as Mr. Price said, these are all the things that you could consider. You could easily say, we don't want that, as far as a fixed number that you could potentially add in every year if you had a number in which you were looking at for enrollment for fiscal reasons. If you wanted to have additional students enrolled, then you'd have to figure out what that was and, you know, how they're accepted.
It seems to me that number 3 is a subset of number 6.
It could be a subset of number 6. You could do number 6 instead of number 3 and then use that ability to keep those students that are existing in. My own concern, I share Mr. Herron's concern about number 3, and the reality is looking at the specialized programs that I know that the demographics in almost every one of those is not representative of the district as a whole. So I am concerned that we would be unfairly privileging some students over others. For number 6, if we were to do it, I would want to change the each year on or before April 1st, because instead it needs to, if you're going to say that there's some openings for interdistrict transfer students, you wouldn't know that until essentially the day school starts, because you'd want to make sure your enrollment was clear and you knew that you had 2 seats that were just sitting there open. But again, I'm concerned again that this will become something that is not that skews demographics in our district, that it will be children of more privileged parents that are aware of this process that apply. So I'm not personally terribly interested in number 6. Mrs. Cordero?
Yeah, I'm not crazy about number 6 either. I just assume not exercise that option. Number 3, I'm interested, as Mr. Herron asked, how many students we would be talking about, because I mean, looking at, I agree with you that it would be a disproportionate, they'd probably be disproportionately white students. But I'm not sure how many we're talking about, because it would only be the students in these academies who are from outside the district. So it might be a small number. It could be a large number, I don't know, I have no idea. But it might be a small number, in which case we wouldn't be adding any additional ones. We'd only be allowing those few to finish out their academic, their high school, program here. In which case, I don't think it would be that dramatic. So I would be really interested in knowing what numbers we're talking about.
Yeah, we can get that for the specific academies, who the students are, how many, and where, who they are, demographics, correct?
Yes.
Right, and my other concern is, how does it impact the program? Not necessarily the students, but the faculty and the programs itself. I mean, so that would be the other question to ask.
Yes, that is an interesting point, in that if it is a large number of students and then you pull them away, then your program might need to go away. So there is that effect as well, Mr. Herron.
I would like the same question asked of number 4. How many estimated students might lose their loss of eligibility? I don't know anything about how that might happen, but obviously somebody does. And again, it's giving, in the elementary district, we got letter after letter of people claiming hardships, of heart-wrenching stories, typically the lower demographics, and we declined almost all of them. And now here, we're setting in motion where they no longer need that set of hardship, and we're saying, okay, you have a pass-through. I just think it flies in the face of what we've been doing on both 3 and 4.
Mrs. Cordero?
Well, I just want to speak in support of 4, because I think because of the language that says that a transfer this would be in place where a transfer to the district of residency would result in a loss of eligibility under the CIF rules. So, I mean, I think it would be unfair to deny a student eligibility by forcing them to return to their district where the CIF would not allow them to continue to play their sport. That one, I think, is a very specific situation because of the CIF, the way that the CIF rules function. And students would not have any way of appealing that.
Mrs. Deacon?
I guess not surprisingly, I agree with Mrs. Cordero on this, because the elementary students that we sent back to their home schools still had the full range of opportunities to get a good education at their schools, but we would actually be restricting a student's ability to pursue the sport that they'd begun in our district, and I think that would be unfair.
Mr. Herron?
Yeah, my question is, I don't know that for a fact. I don't know what this means. So I would just like more description of why they would lose eligibility, and I don't know the answer to that. So I'd like just
I'll just share that as board president. With CIF rules, they're very concerned that varsity athletes in particular, that they don't jump to another school that might have a stronger team or a stronger coach. So typically when you transfer to another school, you are banned from playing your sport for a year. And so it should, I think maybe we want to add the words, where it says in loss of eligibility, it should be in loss of eligibility to play under applicable, et cetera, just for a little bit of clarification. But that is something that they could very well bump up against.
would we demand something in writing from CIF saying that that's the case, or would just take somebody's word for it?
No. Yes, Mrs. Deacon. Yeah, they're very strict and clear. Dr. Noel?
I see 3 and 4 as a question of being grandfathering kids in. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, this is not for new kids at all.
So once those kids are out, there'll be no new. Okay. I have no problem with that. 5, I think, is the camel goes under the tent, and the whole camel will be in before you know it. I think 6, is that what I said? 6, I mean.
Oh, yes, 6. Yeah, because 5 is the one that we've had in place already for the
Right.
elementary
Yeah,
district.
I meant 6, the optional thing. I don't quite understand. That just sounds like a blank check.
Okay. Are there any other comments on the language, the rest of?
I had one, yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Noel.
In number 4, this was apropos of, I think, of Mrs. Cordero's remark. Just one word would make it a little crisper. Down in the second line where you're going attendance at same high school through the 12th grade where a transfer would result in loss of eligibility. Between grade and where, if you put in the 12th grade only where a transfer would result in loss of eligibility.
Thank you.
Would just tighten that up a lot.
Thank you.
Where is that only again? I'm sorry.
It says, where it says, year may be permitted to complete attendance at the same high school through the 12th grade, we're on number 4,
Right.
only
Okay,
where a
thank-
transfer.
And also to play.
Yes, in
after
loss of eligibility to
Mhm.
play under applicable CIF rules. Mr. Herron?
Since this is summer, how many of these 300 and how many families? 280 families know this is taking place. I know we've notified all, incoming 7th graders in any new inter-district this year, we notified them the rules can change.
Right.
But have we notified every family that the rules can change?
For secondary?
Yeah.
No, we have not. That's why we pushed this, got it going as fast as we could. I will say that I have talked to families that have just, for whatever reason, they ended up talking to me about transferring in and how to do it, and I explained it to them, and I just said, you need to know that this discussion will be taking place this fall at the latest.
Well, what I would hope is that since we have it on for conference now and probably for action on the 25th, that by the end of this week, that a letter go out to these families so that they know that they need to come to the board meeting to contact us ahead of time. This, again, I want to be really clear, this is not for the 09-10 year, this is for the 10-11 school year. So we're actually doing it well in advance of what happened with elementary. But they do need to be participating in this. Dr. Noel.
It may be muddying the waters, I'm not sure it would work, but as I look at 3 and 4, and I think of some other specialized experiences that we offer our students, I'm thinking particularly of our highly successful mock trial teams. Do you want to grandfather that in?
Those memberships change year to year.
Huh?
And those memberships change year to year. And virtually every...
There's no continuity through there?
Well, they can try out for it every year, and some kids do it repeatedly, but it's not something that...
In general, do we have any other specialized programs where there's a cumulative value for participation where we be cutting kids off? Very, very much comparable to what... well, in fact, the so-called, what is that? Apple Academy? I mean, that's just basically one teacher's classes, isn't it?
You know, I
Not
looked at
much
that too,
different
and
than
I
I've
think it's
inquired.
much smaller, it's very much smaller than, say, the Matt Academy or the VADA. So,
It's not institutionalized. We've never created it as an act of the board, have we, or did we? I don't remember that.
Yes,
yes, we did,
we?
yes, we
Oh,
did.
okay.
Yes, we did.
All right.
Yes.
I'm not sure what the status of that one is at this time.
Well, I just, you know, in thinking about it, if there are some other programs where they may not have the status of academy, but are serving kids and you're really going to be cutting kids off by not grandfathering them in, then I might well consider it.
Mr. Herron.
I think that's pretty much covered in the, or other unique academic programs not replicated. I mean, that's a wide open door to cover almost anything you want to put in there, any kind of special program.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Okay. Mrs. Cordero.
I'm just coming back to this, some of the language we added to 4, the language to play. And can I just ask that that we check with one of the ADs maybe to see if that language is, because I'm just concerned that it might be too specific, that students might be losing eligibility, like sort of down the line in terms of their number of years or whatever, which I guess technically would be an eligibility to play. But can we just check with that
Yeah,
language
that's
first?
a
I'm
good
just,
idea.
thanks.
It is a technical
Miss-
term. I mean, they refer
Yeah.
to it as eligibility.
Okay. Mr. Herron.
Do I read this correctly, that somebody who's in the 7th grade this year won't be able to go to the 8th grade in 210 to 11? So they won't be able to graduate from their junior high?
That's the way this policy
that's
is
the way
written.
this reads, unless it's, amended or changed.
So we're allowing 11th graders to graduate, but 7th graders won't be able to graduate with their junior high class.
That's
Okay,
promoted.
whatever the word
Yeah,
is.
promoted,
But I'd
but
like to-
that's how it
Yeah.
reads now.
I'd like to know how many kids that is.
Well, for me, because your junior high typically feeds into your high school, I think your child is better off going ahead and moving to the 8th grade, where they are going to be spending their high school years. So, any other comments on this? Okay, we will see it again on February. I wish. August 25th. Moving on to item F3. This is the first reading of proposed changes to board policies and administrative regulations pertaining to Santa Barbara School District's residency requirements, including review of proposed new board policy in AR 5111.1, district residency, and board policy and administrative regulation 5111.12, residency based upon parent-guardian employment.
And this is very much a companion policy to the inter-district agreements. Oh, You may have a point of order here.
Yes, Dr. Noel.
Dr. Sarvis's comment leads to my question. I don't understand number 2 at the top of page 3.
Where are you? Number 2 on,
AR 5111.1, reverse page, side of the page, top of the page, number 2.
right, so yes, 511, that's why we're dealing with both of those policies together.
Well, let's ask Robin Zawoski to make the presentation first, and I think she may explain that as part of that.
You would like to know the difference between the two? Okay, well, I'll just start and go forward.
If, quote, in addition, the district residency status may be granted to a student if at least one parent or guardian is physically employed within Santa Barbara, within district boundaries.
And Dr. Noel, I want you to.
That sounds like.
You're looking at the current policy.
Okay, I should explain, there's a lot here. After the cover, or the, after the agenda item that describes that we're moving forward, because of the elementary district already having a new policy for interdistrict transfers and anticipating the secondary district moving that way, we're looking at our district residency board policies, and in this case, it's administrative regulations. So the first one, AR 5111.1, is about district residency. You have the current one in there, in the very first thing, that does say that students, parents, and guardians that reside within, that work within the district are part of, can be claiming district residency or can go to our schools. The red line is the change, and you can see that big section in the top that's added, and then after that is the proposed final draft that has everything in it. So in the very first paragraph then, for the new one, it says the Board of Trustees of the Santa Barbara School District recognizes the basic principle that a student should attend a school in the district in which the student resides. In addition, the Board of Trustees recognizes that a student should attend the individual neighborhood school in the geographic region in which the student resides, unless the student's parents or legal guardians request and are granted an intra-district transfer, are admitted to an alternative district school, or the student's neighborhood school does not have capacity for additional students. So that's just an overarching statement there. The first big change in the criteria for residency then is number 1, the principal residence where the student physically resides with his or her parents or legal guardians for at least 50% of the school days and nights during the period in which school is in session is situated within the district. 2 through 6 are the same as in our old district residency policy. Number 7 on page 204 in the new policy is different, where it says where the student has been admitted under AR 5111.12, which we're going to come to, which talks about residency based on parent-guardian employment. Because of a parent's employment by the Santa Barbara school districts, however, students granted interdistrict transfers pursuant to Board Policy 5117, which are the interdistrict we just looked at, are not deemed to be district residents within the meaning of the Education Code. So it's making it clear that because Ed Code gives that you can define your residency around parents working in the district. We're making it clear that that's not the case. And that's the whole point of the AR 5111.12, residency based on the employment. The only people that are actually, well, I'll start out with the first paragraph. Because of negative physical impacts, and I'm now on the .12, page 1 of 2, in the final draft. Because these go so closely together, it's hard to separate them out. Because of negative fiscal impacts, the district does not grant district residency status when a parent or guardian is physically employed within district boundaries, except in the case of children of district employees, subject to the application procedures set forth below. And then it goes through how district employees would go through the admission process.
I'm sorry, where were you reading that again?
I was reading that, I'm sorry, I went too
She jumped
fast,
forward
didn't
to
I?
5111.
It's the very last page of the attachments. So they go hand in hand. We need that separate AR 5111.12 to be very specific about how we grant residency based on parent-guardian employment. I'm sure Mr. Price could add more of the legal aspects of that, since he did write these as well, if you have questions.
At this hour, I think you'd prefer asking any questions as opposed to going about it the other way.
Mrs. Cordero?
I had a little bit of a problem with what I thought was sort of with what I perceived the tone of the introductory paragraph to be on AR 5111.1. With the shoulds, I think were what was getting to me, that a student should attend a school in the district and et cetera. So I was wondering if we could just say something along the lines of, the Board of Trustees of the Santa Barbara School District supports the concept of local or neighborhood schools and believes it is best for students to attend their local schools in their local district and in their own neighborhood. So that it's a little bit less wordy, but
The reason I'm hesitating on it is because it's sort of a preamble to here are the rules around this, and it covers both inter and intra, because we actually have a problem with parents falsifying documents on intra-district transfers as well, and preempting the whole lottery process.
well, right, that's why I said in their own districts, and I guess we could say and or their own neighborhoods. Or own attendance areas.
Is this brand new language, or
I think
wasn't this language that was recently constructed for
This
previous?
is brand new language for
Yeah,
this,
this I think
but
is-
there's
this paragraph, I
something
think, is-
similar that we put in the intra.
In the
yes.
intra-district.
Yeah, okay.
Dr. Noel?
Could someone explain to me what education code 48204 is about? I'm looking at the second to bottom paragraph.
The provisions in the education code that relate to allowing children to attend a district out of residence other than through an interdistrict transfer covered in this series, the 48-200 series. And there is a listing of these particular situations, emancipated minor, caregiving adult, et cetera, which the legislature has said result in a requirement that a district allow students falling into those categories. In addition, there is a provision that says a school district may, but is not required to, admit pupils as residents of the district on account of their parents' employment within a district. But if you do that, then it's not an annually renewable situation. And so the thought in proposing these changes to you was to make it clear that residency is not granted by means of parental employment, so that you don't find yourself getting inadvertently stuck, with the one exception for students who are the offspring of district employees.
I guess I'm still a little confused, because this is talking about the board denying a request to leave because parents have a job somewhere else.
Where are you looking at?
maybe I'm just misreading it, Mr. Price.
Are you looking at the end of the,
I'm looking at the paragraph under the bold-faced district. It's on the backside of a red line, AR 51-1.
Those are included, not denied.
1-2. Am I looking at the wrong thing?
They're included, they've complied. That's not a reason to decline, right here. No? Oh, I thought you wanted that.
He's on page 2 of 3 on the next AR.
The title of
Tell me this
district students
paragraph is
transferring?
irrelevant, and I'll be quiet, because when I read it, it looks like we're imprisoning these people. We got you, we're not gonna let you go.
would you mind just reading me the first few words so I can see where you are?
When okay, district students transferring to other districts based on parent/guardian employment, that's boldface.
About 2 of 3.
Paragraph, when a student's parent.
Okay, I've got you. I think the simple answer to that is that this policy pertains to residency from the standpoint of people that want to get into the district, and in addition, residency from the standpoint of people that want to leave this district and go to a different district because their parents are employed in a different district. The legislature has specific provisions that cap the number of students that a district is required to lose to a different district. So it's really, it doesn't have very much application to us going into basic aid, if ever, but there are some school districts in the North County. So instead of having a completely separate policy, they're both different situations are treated under different paragraph headings in one policy.
And it says a transfer may also be denied if the board determines that the transfer would negatively impact a court-ordered or voluntary desegregation plan. Both of these have education code sanctions. Just kind of surprised me that we can deny people's right to leave.
Well, I almost took that out, and then I thought, you know, if it shows up as something that's in a red line, then it'll be late at night, and there'll probably be board discussion, so I just decided to leave it as it was.
Just to see if we're awake.
But this is the existing language from the current AR, and that mimics Ed Code language.
And
Precisely.
I've actually seen that language employed in other districts. Generally, you'll see it where you have multiple declining enrollment districts, and they want to retain their ADA and their all revenue limit versus having inter-district transfers. So they basically, you know, there's that cap provision.
I don't even see how it's enforceable.
Noel?
If my kid, if I work somewhere else and I take my kid to another school, I pull them out. I enroll them in another school. And if they have a policy that says you enroll people who work in your district, who's to stop it?
Dr. Noel, I can chime in with that. Every time there's an inter-district transfer, there's an agreement between the districts. So it works both ways. Everybody else has this in their policies.
Everybody has this. Oh, okay.
No, you can't.
Mr. Price?
Well, the residency provisions are handled in a totally separate manner than inter-district transfers. There's no appeal, a residency determination to the County Board of Education, for example. And the answer to Dr. Noel's question is because that's what the legislature said, and I'm not aware if there have been any challenges.
Okay, far be it for me to do that.
Mrs. Cordero?
I just wanted a clarification on the second page of AR 5111.1. On the very top paragraph on page 2, where it says, however, students granted inter-district transfers pursuant to board policy are not deemed to be district residents within the meaning of the, so when we say that they're not deemed to be district residents, I mean, making the distinction between being an inter-district transfer and being a resident means, does it have any meaning for the student, or is it just for what kind of maybe happens down the road with?
Yes, it is an important distinction because all too often districts will blend together residency issues combined with inter-district transfers, and that's dangerous, because if somebody is granted residency, then they get to keep coming back. And if they start in K, then that can be particularly problematic. So what we're saying is that students, other than children of district employees, who for one reason or another are permitted to attend under the limited circumstances that are available, do so by way of an inter-district transfer, and it shall not be considered or deemed to be a grant of residency.
So that it could be revoked at whatever period.
Yes, it's
Okay.
annually renewable.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Deacon.
I'm on page 1 of 5 on the red line copy. Criteria for residency number 1, which I know we're citing the residency for homeless children, education for homeless children policy. I'm just wondering if, I'd like to suggest some alternate language, because we've changed the wording to say the principal residence, but in fact, many homeless children don't have residences. And so I'm just wondering if we could say something instead like, the student physically resides within the district with his or her parents or legal guardians for at least 50% of the school days and nights during the period in which school is in session. Because the previous line used the word resides, and we've switched to the word residence in our new version. So it's a small point, but I know
Yeah.
that I suspect some of the homeless advocates in our community would raise the point that in fact there are no specific residence necessarily at a fixed place for our homeless students.
Pardon me, would you mind just restating that quickly, please?
I will. Let's see. The student physically resides with his or her parents or legal guardians within the district for at least 50% of the school days and nights during the period in which school is in session.
Can I ask?
I just want to, Mr. Price, do you have any issues with that change?
Any issues right now?
Thank you. Mrs. Cordero?
Well, I was just going to ask, for purposes of voter registration, hasn't the court ruled that like a street corner, a fig tree, could be considered a residence?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, because I know homeless people are allowed to register to vote using
Well-
non-traditional residences.
And maybe staff could address, because we have many homeless children in the district, so maybe staff could address how it applies, how it works right now when homeless children come in. They have lots of protections. Once they're placed at a school site, that is their school site, even if their parents move around. And so regardless of this policy, when a child is defined as homeless, they have tremendous protection.
You know, I do note that in the references just under point 1, it refers to policy 5111.13 that deals with homeless children. And I just don't happen to have that in front of me.
Okay. I would just want to chime in with language that may, a much more minor change than what you were suggesting for the preamble, Mrs. Cordero. And that is simply removing the should, so recognizes the basic principle that a student attends a school in the district in which a student resides, and that a student attends the individual neighborhood school in the geographic region. Is that acceptable, just to get rid of the shoulds?
I'm satisfied with anything that eliminates the shoulds.
Okay. Any other comments on the wording of any other parts of the AR? Mr. Herron?
The sections in, I'm looking right now at the final page 2 or 4, but they all have the evidence of residency. And I'm concerned of, I can give you examples of, number 1, a property tax payment receipts, grant deed with county's recorder stamp and utility bill, but that doesn't mean anybody's living there. It doesn't mean that the family's living there with the student. I can see where somebody has rent payments and they're living in a house with 4 other families, and they can't give you a current utility bill. I'm just wondering if the and's in the right place, if maybe 1, 2, and 4 should be or, and the final thing, and an affidavit of district residency. And even that wouldn't be possible, because sometimes you don't have tax payments, you don't have a grant deed. I guess you could have a lease, and you could give the affidavit, so that would work. But it seems like there's potential loopholes that a family could not give you these things when you have a utility bill as a and, that you can do anything else, but you have to have a utility bill.
And I can chime in on that. If you do not have, if you are residing with other people, if you're sharing an apartment, then you are considered homeless. Homeless. So
Two
again,
families.
you have all the protections as a homeless family in terms of residency.
Would the normal person know that?
Well, our school offices all know that, the
that, okay.
principals all know that, the district knows that.
Okay.
So when they come in to register, if they can't provide the documents, they know what they need
And so they're
to be
considered
directed to
homeless
do.
and not inter-district, possibly.
They're considered residents of the district. Any other comments or questions on it? All right, Mrs. Deacon?
I'm sorry, just one last question, and this doesn't have to do at all with the language, but the fiscal impact is no cost, but I guess my question, who's going to be doing the checking and enforcing?
That's a good question. We do have a person in the back of the room. Bud Andrews is can serve in a partial role now. He now is 0.4% at the 40% at the district office. So we originally thought he would be the person who could go do that. In reality, at the elementary level, the offices, the school offices, have a pretty good handle on who they suspect. I think a lot more that at the secondary level there were way more kids involved, and so we're going to have more attention to that and how we do it. However, at this point, we'll have to work that one out.
Robin and I are going to do it.
Yeah,
We're
here we
gonna
are.
draw straws and
But I think
I think Michael Gonzalez has something to add with that.
Yes,
I
Mr.
just wanted to
Gonzalez.
point out, if you look at page 3 of 5 at the very top, I want to remind the board members and staff that the sentence actually reads, reasonable evidence of residency may be established by documentation, including but not limited to. And I share with you that my own experiences in student services is that it is often that we sit down with parents and negotiate what constitutes documents of residency. So I want to make sure that it's understood that this does not limit the district from accepting other verification. And I think Dr. Hayden had an additional comment that he wanted to share.
Yes, actually, Ed Code requires us to validate the address of every student in the district every year. And so this process will have to take place regardless.
Well, then I'm very concerned that there be somebody that's able to do that at the district, because obviously in terms of following regulations, but also there is going to be a tremendous negative fiscal impact if, because unfortunately, I've already heard so many stories of people coming up with false documents, or so it's unfortunate. But thank you, and we will come back to this at our next meeting. We now move on to item F4, medical marijuana dispensaries in Santa Barbara. It is after 10:30. This board, this agenda, as you may see, runs to 10:40. We will probably, because we have a couple of consent items to come back to, we'll probably run a little bit later. Dr. Noel needs to leave at this time. And
My new eye is tired.
okay. And we will move on to medical marijuana dispensaries in Santa Barbara. And there's
There I am.
there's
All right.
Dr. Sarvis. I don't know if you want to introduce Mr. Andrews.
good. Bud Andrews is responsible for many things. In fact, Bud Andrews is this year going to serve partially as an AP at La Cumbre School. Bud Andrews is our administrator for safety, welfare, and attendance, and we've been dealing with this issue of medical marijuana dispensaries. Frankly, Board, it's become a problem for us. Our kids can get marijuana too easily. Many of the expulsion cases we have for marijuana, whether it's selling marijuana to other kids, is marijuana that comes from these dispensaries, and we need some control for our students. Bud Andrews?
In the interest of time, I'll abbreviate the background, but of course all this stems following the Proposition 215 that passed in '96 and the proliferation of dispensaries throughout California. In fact, you can go to you can Google weed maps, for example, or medical marijuana dispensaries. It will show up with maps of dispensaries, both legal and illegal, throughout California, to include Santa Barbara, the city and the county. In 2008, the city of Santa Barbara adopted an ordinance that attempted to regulate that marijuana accessibility through dispensaries. In fact, on July 31st, Ms. Parker and I attended a meeting organized by the Downtown Organization expressing some opinions about these dispensaries and whether they should be capped in density or in location and number in town. And we're concerned about this proliferation impacting the risk or availability of marijuana to our kids, not just in the raw marijuana form that is readily smokable, but I think even more importantly, because it's more difficult to detect, is marijuana is now found in many consumables. Lollipops, for example. There's brownies and cookies. It's next to impossible for a site administrator to identify a student who's consuming a cookie made from marijuana or with marijuana. And so we as a district and you as a board, of course, want to express your opinions to the city with regards to how we might, or they might consider the schools in their deliberations as they relook that ordinance from 2008.
Board members, you've seen the recommendations here. There's A, B, C, and D. We do have public comment on this item, so let's go ahead and take that.
Mr. Mike Jordan?
Good evening. Well, I know I've never been here before. We'll get to breakfast soon, right? I had the task actually for the Downtown Organization of putting together that presentation a couple weeks ago, and I know Ms. Parker was there and the gentleman behind me. And it was, the Downtown Organization is also extremely concerned about the increasing numbers of dispensaries. Neighborhood activists are also increasingly concerned, and as you're going to get increasingly concerned, you're going to certainly find out that you all have contrasting goals. Everybody wants to push it the other way, and of course somebody's on the receiving end of that. Right now there's certainly number of dispensaries in the city that number in the teens, and maybe even over 20. Of that, only 5 or 6 are legal. 4 that are currently grandfathered before the ordinance went into effect, and either 1 or 2 that have made it through the permitting process. There's probably 2 or 3 more that are currently in the process to be approved. And I'd encourage you to aggressively and proactively get involved in this process. I'll kind of take you back to your talk a little bit before about school crossing guards. I can tell you with assurance that not one person in this room was in the council chambers the day the police department made their budget presentation except me. And just to show you what a weird person I am, it was city council, staff, myself, and about 15 people from DOGPAC who were concerned about the reduction of a animal control officer force from 4 to 3. Nobody else knew about it, even though it was published the week before and it was clearly on the table, and nobody showed up after that time, either parents groups, PTA, or school officials, to talk about the city pulling its funds from the crossing guards. This particular opportunity, even though I think we're already behind the power curves, gives you an opportunity to get out in front and try and rectify what can take place. From a legal and procedural standpoint, anything could be on the table. They could actually go back in ordinance committee and ban the presence of these in our city. I don't think there's the political coin or the political will to do that in De La Guerra Plaza. And personally, I'm in support of these if they're run in a legal and appropriate manner. The city of Anaheim's working its way through the courts right now. They banned them in their city. It's lived through one court appearance, one appellate court appearance, and it's scheduled to be heard by the California Supreme Court before the end of this year on whether they can maintain that ban. The city of Oakland, roughly the size of Santa Barbara.
20 seconds.
I'm sorry. Did I get time served in the back of the room? The city of Oakland has four of these dispensaries. So I would encourage you to look for a cap. I would encourage you also to look for corridors of protection. If I can get a couple more seconds, there's a dispensary that is non-conforming and will have to go away that's on the north side of Mackenzie Park in the 3200 block of State Street. There's also one that's legal now in the 300 block of Milpas Street. The one in Mackenzie sees very little foot traffic, sees very little children walking by. The one that's in the middle of the 300 block of Milpas Street is, of course, on that Montecito Road, Montecito Street Avenue that's going back and forth with children. So you need to look for those nuances when you're getting involved with this too, and protect those corridors and not just get lost in parameters of feet and position.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Board members, any comments on the recommendations?
So, and to add very briefly to what Mr. Jordan just said, the one that he was talking about, the 300 block, is 331 North Milpas. There's also another one that is in the permitting process at 500 North Milpas, which is directly across the street from Jack in the Box.
Comments, changes, suggestions? Mrs. Cordero?
I was just wondering if we could get a copy of the actual ordinance, or is it exceptionally lengthy?
I don't think it's exceptionally lengthy. I can certainly get you a copy.
Yeah, I'd like to see the full ordinance.
Although I'm sure, I mean, it basically says 500 feet from schools at this point.
Correct. From schools and parks.
From schools and parks. There's no limit. There's certain areas of the city where it can be, off State Street, sort of the Mesa, a little bit on the Mesa, a little bit in Uptown, and in the Milpas area, downtown area.
Did the
That's not off
board
State
get a
Street.
copy of the
map?
The map? I have that with me. I
No.
can make sure you get that
Yeah.
before the next meeting as well.
And I was also wondering, in recommendation B, because I assume there's not a whole lot of them, that it would be nice maybe to get a notification of an application, of any application, not just ones that are on a specific route.
There's well, the design of letter B is when it will impact our kids, but you're absolutely right. There probably is not going to be that many where it's going to be problematic to make that notification.
Because we might know something about the route that
The
has
city does not,
special,
right.
traffic or whatever that wouldn't necessarily be familiar to the city.
So the wording would be require district notification when any application is being processed.
There's one thing that's not a recommendation on, that's written here, but something that I think the board should at least consider is encouraging the city not to raise the amount of marijuana that somebody can have in their possession. The law now, Health and Safety 11367.22, Section A says 6 mature plants, 12 immature plants, and 8 ounces of marijuana, the smokable bud of marijuana. 8 ounces is actually quite a bit of marijuana. In their ordinance that they passed in April of 2008, they kept it at that. But Berkeley, for example, has a limit of 2.5 pounds per person. So that
But they
might
have
be
a cap on dispensaries.
But they have a cap on dispensaries, so you don't have to go to as many places to get as much. And there is no age limit on medical marijuana cards.
Is there a move at this point afoot to increase the amount?
No, sir, not that I'm aware.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments on any of the recommendations, or?
Could I ask Mr. Andrews just one quick question? Just speaking strictly in generalities, you said it's your impression that there is an association between our student use and these dispensaries. What
Yes,
leads you
ma'am.
to draw that conclusion?
In my experience, both as a site administrator and as district administrator, interviewing kids going through the disciplinary process, that either directly or indirectly, this marijuana is coming from these dispensaries. I didn't want to go on simply my own opinion on that. I called the sheriff's office, and they don't have an opinion on whether the raw marijuana, smokable form of marijuana, actually comes directly from the dispensaries. What I was told is it could very easily come from somebody's backyard home garden. But very, very clearly, those other consumables, the lollipops, cookies, and brownies, and things like that, do come from the dispensaries.
Okay, thank you. Just in terms of the recommendations in general, I'm fine certainly with the extending the distance, and I absolutely think the routes are critical as they impact our schools. I have to say, I suspect that requesting businesses to close at certain times during the day is probably unrealistic to.
The zoning department can do that.
They probably can, but I don't know if they would. I don't know. I mean, it would be a highly specialized thing to do to one class of businesses. Are liquor stores required to be a certain distance from schools?
I'm unfamiliar with that, ma'am. I can't answer that.
But they are.
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, there's a distinction. The ABC basically has different regulations relative to whether what they call on-site or off-site, whether you consume on-site or whether it's like a liquor store where you can't consume but you can take it off. And I don't know what they are. I think they're 500 and 1,000 respectively, but I'm not absolutely sure. I know I dealt with that in a different district somewhere.
It's lurking in your memory. Any other suggestions for the language? Because we need to have this on for action at our next meeting because we need to give recommendations to the city. So, Mr. Andrews, you've heard some suggestions, particularly on B. And let's maybe make those changes and bring back the map also for when we meet on August 25th. And that will be on the action agenda at that point. Thank you. And with that, we move to G, returning to consent items designated for discussion. They were D9 and D10. D9, approval of recommended personnel action items dated August 6, 2009. That was Dr. Noel that pulled it. Did anybody else have any concerns about it? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
D9, approval of recommended personnel action items. You nodded, it was good enough for me. Carries 4-0. D10, acceptance of the recommended layoffs for California school-age families, education funded positions for the 2009-10 school year. That was also Dr. Noel? All right, is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that carries 4-0. At this time, we are moving forward to coming events. And we already discussed those in the superintendent's report. I don't know if there are any last-minute additions. We will move on to I, board comments and correspondence. Any comments or correspondence? Mr. Herron?
I'll just mention that I went to Farmers Market the last 2 Wednesdays, and I hope that is successful. It was a wonderful environment, and to see the parents with their kids and the food. So I hope that becomes very successful. I did get the chance, along with President Parker, to visit Clear Valley Junior High, where we looked at the technical advances going on in 2 classrooms, where ultimately there'll be 20 computers and all the current anything current that is needed for Read 180. That was a pleasure to see that taking place. Mrs. Deacon and myself went to a service learning conference last week. When was that?
It was Monday.
Like Monday.
It was yesterday.
Down at Carpinteria. And it was interesting. I sat in the classroom and felt like I was back in school. And we also went to a wellness committee meeting, and we learned quite a bit about what's going on in the schools from a standpoint of healthy food. So Mrs. Deacon may want to mention more, but it's been very productive.
And I would chime in that I think a number of us have been going to the Harding Farmers Market, and as a parent of a young kid, it's the best farmers market because there's a playground. So moving on to future agenda items. Board members, anything to add?
I have a future agenda item.
Dr. Sarvis.
I'm ready to recommend an executive director of special education to the board. And our next board meeting is 2 weeks away. I would like the board to meet this Friday, next Tuesday night, probably no later than this next Tuesday night, to discuss and meet with that person in closed session, and then to take it on as an agenda item. We'd publish the name in advance. We'd publish the qualifications.
Mr. Herron, I think you have you will be out of town.
Right, I'll be out of town, but that's no reason not to
I'm not
proceed.
available Friday. I would be available next Tuesday.
Tuesday.
I'm not available Friday either, but I could be available
Tuesday. All right, my hope, since Dr. Noel has already left, is that you would call him in the morning and see if he could make Tuesday.
I will as well.
But let's put that on, so that's Tuesday, the 18th.
Preference
Because
on
we don't
meeting
have any
time?
time.
That will just a brief meeting? I mean, that's
Well-
not, we're not going to have a full.
This is the.
I'd like the board to have enough time in closed session to discuss the person's qualification and to actually meet with the person.
What I mean is, we're not going to add additional things onto that agenda. It's not going to become a meeting, a regular
I have
meeting.
no anticipation,
No,
no
no,
other
no, no,
items
no,
to
no,
add
no.
to the
Okay.
agenda. But that's a reasonable question, because we have often done that in
Yes,
the
we
past.
have. Thank you.
Yes.
So are we looking at a 6 o'clock meeting time for closed session, and then?
What's your preference, board?
Is that okay? So a 6 p.m. meeting time for closed session, and then 7 p.m. for open?
Good.
Okay. And anything else, Mrs. Deacon?
Oh, I had one more agenda item down the line. One of the consent items had to do, it illustrated the utility bills at all of our schools, and I had a chance to talk with Mr. Hedjunk and Brian Tangway about this a little bit, but I would like to bring back to the board a discussion about how we can encourage more efficiency in our utilization of water, power, things like that, and move towards some greener practices. I know we're working in that direction, but I think maybe there's some specific things we could do sooner rather than later.
Great. And Mrs. Cordero?
I just want to follow up on one of the suggestions that was made earlier today in one of the public comments. I've raised this issue a number of times about trying to get our meetings televised in Spanish. And I don't know if that needs to become an agenda item or if we can just follow up on it with staff, but
We can make it an agenda item. In fact, I made a note to Barbara Kiani to give us a board brief on the possibility of conducting meetings or televising meetings in Spanish. And you know, our past concerns about this have been to get airtime, and airtime is still a problem. We'd have to look at it again with the city channel. And I know in the past that they've been willing to give us airtime, but it's at 1 o'clock in the morning, which seems rather demeaning to me.
I'm just
so-
wondering if there's also the possibility of looking at subtitling, if subtitling could be made available on
captioning
Spanish language captioning, so. I don't know, it could be more expensive, but, yeah. Any other, Mr. Herron?
Yes, there's been a lot of discussion, and I'm not sure if it's an agenda item or exactly what format, lot of discussion about counselors, and I understand that some changes were made today, and as a result, we didn't have any counselors here tonight. But it did involve a motion that the board has adopted, and I just want to make sure that, that the intent of the motion is carried out, and it might be slightly changed, but
Could
I
it
don't
be
know.
some information that we get in a board brief?
In some way, yeah, and I'd like to, because it was a board motion that wasn't carried out, I think we need something to explain the current situation.
All right. With no further objections, this meeting is adjourned.